Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. My girlfriend saves the world, and I am responsible for dating. Chapter 41. After the female guard packed up and left the small dark room, Shenan lay alone on the relatively clean bed, holding his aunt's starlight flying crown tightly in his arms, and the swaying and cold firelight fell on him. The crown, of course, could not be returned. After all, returning it would be a slap in the face of Aunt Diana. However, this crown is too heavy. In all aspects, it is the most precious thing in the world and cannot be measured by value. Can I bear it? Shenan lay on the bed for a long time, and finally sighed, put the crown back on his head, got up and walked out of the room. Even if he didn't have claustrophobia, it was too stuffy here, and he wanted to go out for a breath. However, Shenan was halfway to the door when he recalled that the female general Antiope had ordered the female guards on duty at the door not to let him walk around. Now, he can fully understand why Antiope's attitude towards him is so bad. If someone wants to take advantage of Aunt Diana, Shenan's attitude will definitely be 100 times worse. And if he knew in advance the meaning behind the crown held by his aunt, Shenan would never let her wear it on her head. If he forced to go out for a walk as His Highness, the female guard would not dare to stop him, but Shenan did not want to embarrass the female guard, so he turned back in the corridor by himself. Back to his door, Shenan suddenly stopped and looked at the depths of the corridor inside the ancient building. There was some light at the end, and there was also a subtle wind coming through the dark corridor. Since you are not allowed to walk around outside, it doesn't matter if you walk inside, right? Shenan shrugged. Besides, the female guard just said that as long as you don't take the objects inside out, there will be no problem. Shenan didn't think too much, and didn't stop, and continued to walk deeper into the ancient building. This wall is really thick. The further Shenan walked into the corridor, the more surprised he felt. This ancient circular building, except for the dark room on duty just now, has almost no other rooms. All of them are solid brick walls, and there is only a not very spacious corridor leading to the inside. Can you imagine it? From the design style, this circular building is like a closed pokeball. As long as the corridor is closed, no one can get out from it. Perhaps, only the 3-in-1 state can force its way out when trapped inside. Shenan pondered for a moment, and suddenly remembered the Devourer. My aunt said it was not easy to bring it to Paradise Island, so she entrusted it to a friend who had experience in raising pets to take care of it for a few days. That friend seemed to be called Barry Allen. Shenan quickly came to the deepest part of the building. The moment he walked out of the corridor, the scene in front of him became clear. Inside, it was a very spacious retro hall. The hall was engraved with strange stone murals and ancient Greek characters around it, as if recording along an unknown history of the old gods. There was light, cool breeze, and air seeping in from the gaps between the star-shaped metal fences on the top floor of the hall. Weak beams of light that were barely visible from the dust shone down and delicately fell on the stone altar in the middle of the main hall of the ancient building. Above the 2-meter-high stone altar, there was a mysterious cube-shaped object, like a rusty metal box. The iron box, I don't know how long it has been placed here, the faint light, the floating dust, and even the years, have all been quietly sinking beside it. This is what has been guarded for more than 1,000 years. Shenan was stunned for a moment. He finally knew why no one could move it for 1,000 years. Not to mention that Paradise Island has its own Zeus barrier and is guarded by Amazonians on duty, just for its pitiful appearance. Who wants this broken box? Of course, maybe it is a hidden artifact. Shenan did not intend to study it. He stood in front of the stone altar and began to do the middle school student chest lifting exercise. He took a deep breath. The air in the deepest main hall was connected to the outside world, and Shenan felt a lot more comfortable. But, suddenly, his peripheral vision seemed to see something. Shenan stopped moving, and his eyes fell on the iron box on the top of the stone altar in surprise. Just now, did that thing move? Paradise Island, Amazon Palace. The palace is magnificent, and any decoration inside, including the golden chairs and beaded curtains that are still in use, are collectors' collections. Mother. Diana walked into the palace and squatted on a chair. On the golden chair, a dignified woman who looked a bit like Diana, with a face and body that did not look old, and wearing a golden crown, Amazon Queen Hippolyta could not help but show an excited and sincere smile. Hippolyta reached forward and gently touched Diana's face with her palm. Child, you suffered alone outside. No. Diana shook her head gently, grabbed her mother's hand and said, Mother, I'm fine and can take care of myself. Of course I know. After all, you are the only daughter of my Amazon Queen. Hippolyta smiled and nodded, then suddenly paused and looked at Diana's forehead. Diana, your starlight flying crown. Mother, I was just about to tell you this. I didn't come back alone this time. Diana smiled happily, and said very seriously and proudly, I gave it to a person, a human being. Ancient building, in the main hall. Shenan looked at the iron box in a daze. Didn't the female guard just say that this thing hadn't moved for 1,000 years? Why did he see the iron box shaking slightly just now? Blurred eyes, did he see it wrong? This possibility cannot be ruled out. Shenan just glanced at it with his peripheral vision, and it is very likely that the interference of light and shadow made him mistakenly think that the box moved. To confirm, Shenan held his breath and approached the stone altar. When he was close to 3 meters, Shenan could see more clearly that the iron box on the stone altar had strange patterns, like stars in the sun, and a very thick layer of dust accumulated on the surface of the box. The beam of light on the dome of the building bathed him. Shenan subconsciously reached out to the iron box on the stone altar, trying to wipe off the dust on the surface of the box. Fingers, approaching little by little. The moment before the fingertips were about to touch the box, Shenan hurriedly retracted his hand. What are you doing? It's not a good habit to touch other people's things. However, looking at the dust on the box, Shenan also confirmed that he had indeed seen it wrong just now. If the box really shook, the dust on it would definitely be shaken off. Forget it, let's go back. Shenan gave up exploring the broken box and turned to walk out of the main hall of the building. Shenan didn't find it. As soon as he walked out of the main hall and entered the corridor, the iron box placed on the stone altar trembled slightly for some unknown reason, shaking off a lot of dust. The dust that fell off disappeared strangely in the space in the hall before it fell to the ground. The box seemed to be trembling with its own life, as if it was afraid of something, and this trembling soon fell back into the calmness that had been maintained for thousands of years. It continued to lie dormant, waiting for an opportunity. Inside the Amazon palace, Diana's eyes were bright and she looked at the Amazon Queen naturally, like a female knight with proud and glorious wings, rather than the princess who was protected and loved by all the Amazons. Mother, when I was a child, didn't you say that humans are the most miraculous, powerful, and infinitely potential artifacts created by the gods? She paused and said sincerely, when I went to the human world outside, I was looking forward to it, but soon I was completely disappointed with humans. So, in fact, I exiled myself and chose to stay in the world over there to find an answer for my heart. Did you find it? Hippolyta's frown eased, and she looked at her only daughter calmly. Yes, I understand what you said at the beginning. Diana smiled slightly. Shenan, he is the miracle I chose, and the answer I want to find. Hippolyta was silent for a moment, and asked softly, are you so confident in him? Diana's heroic eyebrows spread like a sword, and she said seriously, I have confidence in myself, so I made this decision. She gently held her mother's hand and whispered, Mother, you won't blame me, right? How could it be? Hippolyta shook her head and looked at her and said, you are my daughter, no matter what decision you make, I support you. But at this time, from the door of the palace, the female general Antiope walked in angrily, and as soon as she stepped into the door, she said in a deep voice, I don't agree. Antiope. Hippolyta raised her eyes and glanced at her. Greetings, Her Majesty. Antiope knelt on one knee in the palace hall and saluted, then repeated, I disagree with Her Highness Diana's choice. She is the princess of our Amazon tribe. How can she bet everything on a weak and young human? Antiope. Diana was about to speak, but Hippolyta patted the back of her hand and said to Antiope, you are still so hot-tempered. Do you remember when Diana was a child? Antiope frowned, not knowing what the queen wanted to say. Hippolyta whispered, when Diana was a child, she liked to peek at your daily training with the Amazon warriors. Because of my love for her, I didn't want her to become a warrior, so I scolded her many times and publicly forbade Diana to touch weapons. But, in the end, she still ran away secretly to train with you. Antiope opened his mouth, wanting to say something but stopped. I think you should know it very well, Hippolyta said with emotion. You and I can't influence Diana when she was a child, so how can we influence her choice when she grows up? You said she was outstanding enough, and now this is the decision she made, how can you question her? Antiope was completely silent. She clenched her fist tightly, and then loosened it a little bit, and said helplessly, I respect the decision of Her Highness Diana. And when the Amazon Queen Hippolyta and the female General Antiope no longer vetoed, no one in Paradise Island could question Diana's choice. This will also show that Shenan's identity and status in Paradise Island will rise to the same position as the Amazon Princess Diana. Diana suddenly said, Antiope, I have another thing I want to ask you, it's about Shenan. Queen Hippolyta was slightly stunned. Entrusting the matter about Shenan to Antiope, isn't this unreliable? Antiope raised his eyebrows and said, Your Highness Diana, you say. Diana whispered, I think, let Shenan. In the ancient building. Shenan, lying in the small dark room, was starving and collapsed on the bed. Suddenly, there was a clear sound of footsteps from the corridor outside. Someone is finally here. Shenan sat up suddenly, and saw the previous female guard hurried in with a set of clothes in her hand. Your Highness, change it quickly, General Antiope wants to see you. Is it time for dinner? Shenan took the clothes handed over by the female guard, and took off his shirt without thinking, scaring the female guard to run out in a panic. What? It's not like I haven't seen a man before. Shenan muttered for a while, changed the clothes given, and walked out of the ancient building. Walked out of the long and dark corridor of the ancient building. When Shenan came to the door, he felt like he saw the light of day again. He looked down at the clothes he had just changed. Well, this time at least it was proper men's clothing, a brown linen short-sleeved top and leggings for easy movement, which were also the characteristics of old clothing in ancient Greece. However, these leggings looked like they were newly modified and sewn, with new threads. Before Shenan could think about it, a sound of horse hooves and roars sounded in front, and a group of female cavalry quickly appeared in front of the ancient building on the edge of the cliff. The one riding a black horse in the lead was naturally the female General Antiope. Antiope looked at Shenan at the door, whispered a few words to the female guard, and then said to the female cavalry behind her, Leave him a horse. Horse. Shenan looked at a female cavalry pulling a sturdy and handsome white horse to him, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Sir, times have changed. Can we get some modern means of transportation? Seeing that Antiope and the female knights were all staring at him, Shenan could only exchange glances with the nearby white horse. The female guard seemed to see his embarrassment and stepped forward and asked, Your Highness, do you want me to help you get on the horse? Then I'll leave it to you. Shenan was deeply moved, and then he flew. He was thrown 2 or 3 meters up by the female guard and landed on the back of the white horse. The white horse was frightened and carried Shenan violently, moving its limbs and flying out like an arrow. Let's go. Antiope stared and led the female cavalry to chase the white horse. The white horse began to slow down its pace under the escort of the female cavalry. Shenan on the saddle was still in shock. Fortunately, he grabbed the leash in time, otherwise he would have been thrown out. After riding on the white horse to catch his breath, Shenan found that the female cavalry slowed down not for his sake, but because they had entered the town area of Paradise Island. The smooth and spacious white stone road winds through the mountain road, and countless white buildings stand on both sides of the road. When the female cavalry team led Shenan through the town road, hundreds of local residents in white long skirts, and even armed soldiers standing guard everywhere, all came to the side of the road and stared at Shenan in the center of the team, with strange colors in their eyes. Shenan suddenly had a sense of déjà vu, as if he was surrounded and scrutinized by relatives such as aunts and uncles when he first came to his partner's house. This is no longer as simple as a group of relatives, but a tribe and a race. This is not the point. The point is that all the people who appeared were women. There is no man, and there is no old man in his prime. Shenan finally realized why the men's clothes on his body were newly sewn. Because men's clothes are not needed on this island. Paradise Island. Why not change the name to the Kingdom of Women? Antiope led the female knights and took Shenan through the town of Paradise Island to a mountain. Shenan, riding on a white horse, felt his eyes light up. This mountain seemed to have been cut off by a mighty force, like a natural training ground platform with open sides. The field was covered with soft grass like a carpet, and faced the sky and the ocean with no end. On the natural training ground grass, dozens of tall female warriors with bare arms and wearing battle skirts were bravely and seriously practicing with each other. Each of them has a physical fitness that is better than that of ordinary humans, and they are using real swords and guns in their hands. The fierce collision between the sword and the tip of the knife, sparks flying, and the sound of metal clashing is endless. These are the female warriors of the Amazon tribe. If they are faced by a modern human army of equal number, they will undoubtedly be crushed into meat. Facing invaders, they will rush to the front and fight at the first time. Seeing Antiope riding a black horse here, the female warriors on the training ground stopped their actions and saluted respectfully, "General." Then, their undisguised hostile eyes, like sharp swords, all fell on the boy behind Antiope. No one needs to explain, everyone knows Shenan's identity at a glance. After all, as a human being, and a male, he is too recognizable on Paradise Island. What's more, he wears the starlight flying crown exclusive to the royal family on his head. If eyes can kill, Shenan obviously has been killed countless times. Shenan sighed secretly, and he could understand where the hostility of the Amazon warriors came from. These female warriors are more powerful and more violent than the female guards. For them who advocate strength, they, as a minor human, are far from worthy of the princess of the Amazon. But, understanding does not mean acceptance. They can indeed look down on themselves as human beings, but now he is wearing the crown of his aunt on his head. Shenan, who had been unable to sit on the white horse before, looked up coldly and faced the female warriors who were looking at him with hostility. Under the shining golden sunlight, the starlight flying crown glowed with circles of majestic and shining halos, making the young Shenan sitting on the white horse seem like a member of the royal family. Many Amazon female warriors subconsciously avoided his gaze and dared not look directly at him. Antiope was a little surprised. She deliberately let the most brave and powerful female warriors fight against Shenan, just to give Shenan a warning and let him know that he could not bear the weight of the crown. But Antiope's idea was wrong, very wrong. In fact, Shenan also believed that he could not bear the crown of great significance to his aunt, but now as long as this crown is still on his head for a second, he will never give in to anyone and bow his head to let anyone tarnish its glory. If he bows his head, it will be the dignity and honor of Aunt Diana that will be damaged. This is Shenan's reverse scale. Antiope seemed to suddenly wake up and shouted to the female warriors, "Hurry up and salute." The female warriors looked at each other, and no matter how reluctant they were, they saluted to Shenan on the white horse, the crown he was wearing. "Greetings, Your Highness." Shenan patted the white horse, and even the white horse was much more obedient at this time, and bowed down obediently. Antiope fell off the black horse and gave instructions to the female warriors, "Rest on the spot first, and then practice after lunch." "Yes, General." The female warriors packed up their weapons, and soon, ordinary civilians brought figs, cheese, bread, and freshly roasted meat. These female warriors were not restrained, and they formed a circle to eat on the spot. The horses were tied to the side of the grass. Shenan sat down alone on the grass, and soon, a hearty meal was brought to him. "Your Highness, this is how we Amazon warriors usually eat lunch. If you're not used to it, I can arrange for you to have lunch indoors." Antiope came over, holding a roasted leg of lamb in her hand. Perhaps it was because of what Shenan had done just now that she changed her mind a lot, and her face was far less cold than before. "Just treat it as a picnic, it's a good experience." Shenan shrugged, washed his hands with clean water, and ate bread and barbecue on the spot. He was really hungry. Antiope looked at Shenan, who was eating very deliciously, and suddenly she was a little dazed. She remembered that when Diana was a child, after being approved to train with their warriors, she also refused to have lunch in the palace, but followed them to eat on the grass of the training ground. Antiope said, "Thank you." "What?" Shenan looked at her in confusion. "Thank you for defending the reputation of Her Highness Diana just now." Antiope had no expression on his face. "You don't need to thank me for this," Shenan said bluntly. "She is my family, this is my duty." Family duty. Antiope's eyes flashed with a strange color. After lunch, Shenan thought he could go back to rest, but he saw Antiope suddenly stand up and pick up two cold and shining ancient Greek swords from the weapon rack next to the training ground. Swish! Antiope held a Greek sword himself, and the other sword was inserted diagonally into the grass in front of Shenan. Come on. What are you going to do? Shenan looked at the long sword and frowned slightly. This scene also attracted the attention of all the female warriors on the field, and they all came to watch. It is my duty to invite you to fight, Antiope said coldly. Now, it is time to perform your duty, pick up the sword and fight with me. I don't know how to use a sword. Shenan's words have not yet finished. Antiope suddenly sprinted forward, with a strong hunting wind, and swung the Greek sword in his hand towards Shenan. Let's play it for real. Shenan's brown pupils suddenly shrank, and almost subconsciously, he held the long sword stuck on the ground with both hands, pulled it out, and stood it in front of his body to block. Clang! A sword flew out, spun several times, and stuck diagonally on the grass behind Shenan. Shenan looked at his empty hands and felt severe pain in the tiger's mouth. But it was Antiope who rushed forward and suddenly changed his chop to a pick, knocking the long sword out of Shenan's hand. Obligations require corresponding abilities to be completed. Antiope looked at Shenan coldly. Too weak. You, like this, also want to take away the most precious treasure of this island. As the guardian of Your Highness Anna's evil wolf and scorpion, I have the obligation to bite your neck off at any time. Shenan did not speak, but turned around, picked up the sword again, and held it in his hand. Come again. Facing the strongest general of the Amazon clan, the human boy wearing a star crown said firmly. At this time, Washington. A white young man in his early 20s was carrying a backpack and yawning sleepily as he took out his keys and opened the door and returned to his home. Change into house slippers at the door. That's right. Barry Allen suddenly remembered something. Last night, a friend entrusted him with a kitten to take care of. That kitten has been sleeping from last night to this morning, and I don't know if it's awake now. Thinking of this, Barry couldn't help but take out a can of small fish from his backpack and walked to his room. Open the door. What caught Barry's eyes was the zippered pet bag on the table. The little orange cat that was originally curled up in it had long disappeared. Where did he go? Barry muttered for a while, but he wasn't too worried. Because he has rich experience in raising pets, he plans to apply for a job as a pet store clerk in the future. Before leaving home in the morning, he had closed the doors and windows and unplugged the electric plug in advance. Even if the kitten runs around the house, there shouldn't be any danger. Barry seemed to notice something and stared blankly in front of his desk. Wait, where is his chair? Where are the chairs? Such a big chair that was originally in the room disappeared out of thin air. Just when Barry thought his home was being robbed, a soft cat meowed from behind. Barry looked back and saw a harmless-looking little orange cat standing in front of the door, watching him with vigilance. Kitty, you are here. Barry breathed a sigh of relief and shook the canned fish in his hand. Look, I brought you something to eat. Barry walked forward, approaching the little orange cat. Accidents happen. The little orange cat suddenly opened its mouth ferociously, and several thick and terrifying tentacles stretched out from the mouth, and swept towards Barry in the room at high speed. Barry's eyes widened in surprise. At the critical moment, a slight flow of electricity appeared next to him. The next moment, the little orange cat, the room, and even the world, everything came to a standstill. No, not still, but Barry was so fast that time stopped for him. Barry, who had entered a certain state of ability, fell into silence for a while around the element-eating beast that almost stopped in front of him. He remembered. The friend seemed to have reminded me that there was something special about this kitten. Is this special? This is not a cat. Paradise Island, above the training ground. Clang. Countless times, the Greek sword in Shenan's hand was knocked out and nailed to the grass. Shenan's palms were red, almost bleeding. Despite this, he had no intention of admitting defeat. He walked towards the sword again and again grasped the Greek sword with the 5 fingers of his right hand. Come again, Shenan gasped, holding the sword firmly, and once again faced Antiope, who was not breathing at all. Around the two of them, there were already a crowd of female warriors, and further outside, many Amazon residents stood beside the building, watching this battle with a huge disparity in strength. It's useless. Antiope had no expression on his face. He approached Shenan with a single step, and landed a sword with both strength and speed. Shenan tried his best to block it with his sword, but he fell backwards with the sword and fell hard on the grass. The surrounding female warriors and residents all shook their heads. Only Antiope on the field suddenly showed a subtle expression. This time, Shenan held the sword and did not let it go. Of course, there's a price to pay. When Shenan held up the sword to support his body, a drop of blood flowed down between his fingers and landed on the hilt of the Greek sword. Antiope looked at the young man who was standing up, and said coldly, "It's useless, just admit defeat as soon as possible." "Antiope, you were right." Shenan held the sword and smiled. "If I want to protect her in the future, I have to become stronger." He said inexplicably, "Are you sweating?" "It's just the sun. You're not enough to make me sweat." Antiope lowered her head and glanced at her body. To be honest, Shenan was indeed stronger than she thought. But that's all. She couldn't see any hope in Shenan. This made Antiope feel a little disappointed, and once again he had the idea of questioning Her Royal Highness the Princess's choice. Tread. At this moment, Shenan seemed to be dragging his sword and sprinting towards Antiope. Antiope raised his eyebrows, completely unexpected that the other party would choose to take the initiative. "It's useless." Antiope shook his head and was about to raise his sword to fight, but found that Shenan threw the long sword in his hand first when he was halfway through. Abandoned the sword voluntarily. "Stupid." Antiope shouted in a low voice, swung his long sword, and immediately swung the thrown long sword to the ground. But at the same time, Shenan rushed to Antiope's body, clenched the hand that was holding the sword into a fist, and hit Antiope's exposed shoulder with all his strength. Antiope's body was motionless, like a burly mountain, which was difficult to shake with the strength of a human teenager. "You lose." Antiope's right hand turned into a knife and slashed at Shenan's neck, but before the knife fell, his wrist was suddenly firmly grasped by a hand. "It's Shenan's hand." Now, a glimmer flashed in Shenan's eyes, and he twisted his waist violently, and with the powerful force in his hands, he lifted Antiope's whole body and swung it towards the open space beside him. The sword in Antiope's hand fell off and was grabbed by Shenan. Snap! Not only Antiope fell 10 meters away, but even the female warriors on the field were stunned, looking at Shenan, the only one standing on the field. It was obviously a one-sided situation, but it was reversed in an instant. What happened at that moment? What's going on? Antiope, who was lying on the ground, was still a little confused and couldn't understand what was happening at the moment. Just now, Shenan's hand transmitted a power comparable to his own. No, it was a point stronger than his own. She naturally didn't know. At the moment when Shenan hit that punch, the blood on his hand was exchanged with the sweat on Antiope's body, meeting the prerequisite for triggering the Lord of the Dependents. Antiope's physical strength was superimposed on Shenan, which caused a reversal. The general was repelled. How is this possible? Great, great. After the shocking and noisy discussions, applause rang out over the training ground. The Amazon warriors didn't care about that. Whether it was the boy's unyielding and courage, or the wonderful reversal at the end, it was enough to make them respect him and feel ashamed of their previous rudeness. Looking at Shenan, who was wearing a crown and holding a long sword, who changed everyone's views on the field, Antiope also showed an expression of, "Lost to you. Your Highness Diana, is this what you call a miracle?" At night, the sky over Paradise Island is dotted with stars. In an ancient round building, the bright and cool moonlight flows in through the gap of the star-shaped iron window in the main hall. In the dark and silent-only corridor, accompanied by the sound of rustling and friction, a young figure drags heavy items into the room. Mother box. Shenan breathed a sigh of relief, placed the mattress in the small black room in the corner of the open-air main hall, and then lay down on it completely tired. The small dark room is too closed, so it is better to sleep in the airy main hall. Anyway, there is nothing else here except a box. Do you have any problem with me sleeping here? Neighbor box. Shenan glanced at the iron box placed on the stone altar not far away and asked sincerely. The mother box was motionless. If you don't say anything, I will agree on your behalf. Shenan blinked and slept on the mattress with a very peaceful mind, covered with a quilt. Mother box. How does it move? How dare you move? I don't know how my aunt is doing. When Shenan fell asleep, he still held Xinguang Fidian tightly in his arms. Today, he saw many people on Paradise Island, but he did not see Aunt Diana alone. That's right, I haven't seen my mother for so long, so I must have stayed in the palace and not come out. Shenan thought about it, and soon fell into a distant and deep dream. Sleep until midnight. The temperature in the main hall continued to drop a few points. Shenan suddenly felt a chill in his body. Before he could open his eyes, he felt a familiar fragrance faintly coming from the tip of his nose. It was like a garden of violets blooming beside me. Shenan woke up with a start. He opened his eyes wide and looked beside him blankly. A beautiful and mature woman was lying on the mattress next to her. The woman's black slightly curly hair fell freely on the bed. Her eyes were closed, and her eyebrows and eyelashes looked dark and thick. From the exquisite face with its own beauty effect, there is a tall and delicate body made of perfect proportions. The proud breasts rise and fall in excellent shape, rising and falling with the even breathing, and the slender and toned waist. A pair of long legs can only be bent and overlapped to prevent them from sticking out of the bed. She was wearing a noble and gorgeous golden royal dress, and the bright moonlight covered her body like a silver gauze. She was like a god who did not belong to the human world, with an unreal sense of beauty. It seems that Shenan has woken up and is watching him. The woman's beautiful jewel-like eyes opened slightly, clearly reflecting the face of the boy nearby. Auntie, why are you here? Shenan thought he was dreaming. Didn't you say that in the morning? Do you want to hold me tonight? Diana said, as if it was a matter of course for her to be here. Morning, Shenan suddenly remembered. In fact, he just said that casually. Unexpectedly, my aunt not only remembered it, but also came here to fulfill her wish at this time. Auntie's version of Ding Dong Cat, you deserve it. Really, is that okay? His eyes fell on the slender waist like a mermaid, and Shenan felt that his heart accelerated a lot. Yeah, Diana nodded gently. So, Shenan put his hand gently on his aunt's waist. Shenan's first feeling was, it is worthy of being said to be the royal clothing of the Amazon clan. The fabric is obviously the finest silk and satin. The fabric is soft, warm, and smooth, with a hint of powerful toughness. There is no excess fat at all. I can imagine that it must be healthy underneath. Color. Shenan cherishes love and affection more and more, so much so that he doesn't dare to use force, and just holds her gently with one hand, like a ruler measuring his waist. Although he knew that even with the power of Antiope, he would not be able to harm his aunt in the slightest. Women's waists are generally untouchable, and the perception here is sometimes even sharper than the so-called feet. After all, whether it's up or down, it's an extremely important place. Shenan gently held Aunt Diana's waist without making any other movements, or that was enough for now. This is already a big step ahead than before. Shenan could feel her aunt's body shaking slightly, and suddenly felt relieved. It turned out that she was not the only one who was so nervous and careful. Auntie, this crown. Shenan seemed to remember something and took out the starlight flying crown in his arms. Put it with you first. Diana said softly, you need it now. Okay, I will take good care of it. Shenan nodded solemnly. After the afternoon battle, he no longer resisted. If even he himself thinks that he cannot bear the crown, how can he make the Amazons on Paradise Island believe that they can bear and protect the crown and the future of his aunt? This afternoon. In fact, I asked Antiope to fight with you specifically. Diana touched Shenan's forehead with a warm finger, and said with a smile as if she was tapping, my unawakened body is Shenli also trained with Antiope before, so I wanted her to help train you, but I didn't expect you to hold back at all. Shenan smiled bitterly. In fact, he also noticed that Antiope had been letting off steam. The afternoon was more like a special sparring session than a battle. Otherwise, with Antiope's strength, he would not be able to get out of 2 rounds. In the next few days, you will train with Antiope. Diana arranged. You need to master more combat skills. In this way, after you trigger the ability of the Lord of the Followers, you can better adapt to and control the abilities of others. Don't accidentally break the window at home and lose control of your body like before. Okay, Shenan sighed. It seems that this relaxing and enjoyable trip is completely ruined. If you perform well. Diana thought for a while, suddenly took Shenan's hand, got up and left the mattress, walked out of the corridor, and said, at night, I will let you hug me for a while. Shenan eyes lit up immediately. The goal and motivation suddenly came. In order to better adapt to physical ability times in order to get the limited edition pillow of my aunt. So, the next morning, when Shenan appeared on the training ground excitedly and full of energy, and took the initiative to ask for her to teach, the female general Antiope herself was a little confused. Although he was confused, Antiope still taught Shenan strictly and seriously. Swordsmanship, javelin throwing, archery, shield fighting, horse riding. Even if it was basic training according to human standards, Shenan was still exhausted after a day. He could only hug a pillow with a great feel at night to heal his body and mind. That's it. 3 days passed quickly. The last day of Diana and Shenan on Paradise Island finally arrived. Paradise Island. Shenan's third day of training on the island came to an end. Half of the sun sank into the sea level, and the sea seemed to be burning with flames. Tomorrow is the day when Diana and Shenan will leave the island and return to the human world. It will also be the day of the annual Amazon Warrior competition on Paradise Island. This is a tradition that has existed since ancient times on Paradise Island, which values force. It is a competition that runs through individual cross-country, swimming, horseback riding, archery, spear throwing and other levels to select the strongest warrior. At that time, everyone in the Amazon family will step forward. Come watch and gather. Either way, the current night on Paradise Island is destined to be different from usual. When the female general Antiope came down from the mountain where the training ground was located, she saw Diana without a crown and black hair shawl, standing at the intersection that she must pass home. Your Highness Diana. Antiope was about to salute, but Diana stepped forward first. Just like the little girl she once was, Diana held her arm and said with a dexterous wink, Antiope, how about walking with me? Antiope felt a little helpless towards her, but more caring, so he nodded without hesitation. As night fell, the two came to the cliff next to the training ground. Diana said, Antiope, thank you for your training and teaching of Shenan these days. It's nothing. Teaching him is no different from teaching other Amazons. Antiope shook his head and said in a deep voice, have you really decided? You will leave Paradise Island again tomorrow and go back outside. To the human world. Antiope raised his brows and said dissatisfied, it's only been 3 days. That boy has only learned a little bit of everything. To make him a real warrior, he needs more time to hone. Quote. Diana suddenly burst into laughter and said, Antiope, weren't you very reluctant to teach him at the beginning? Now, why do you want to teach him more things? Just like before, just like when I was a kid, I was secretly trained. Antiope was noncommittal about this, I admit it. He still has some talents in learning and fighting. Unfortunately, after all, he is just an ordinary human being. No matter how hard he practices, he can only improve his self-protection ability. Diana said, as long as there is a foundation, that is enough. Could it be that? Antiope recalled for no reason the strange scene where Shenan suddenly reversed the situation 3 days ago. Antiope pondered for a moment, looked at Diana and said, your mother, aren't you still planning to summon him? Now, compared to a few days ago, some Amazons have gradually recognized him. That's not enough. Diana's beautiful eyes flashed brightly. She said, Antiope, can you please do me one more thing? Your Highness Diana, please speak. Antiope nodded solemnly. Diana said, I want to help Shenan register for him to participate in the warrior competition tomorrow morning. What did you say? Antiope suspected that he had heard wrongly, with a look of shock on his face. She soon understood again. If Shenan can perform well in the warrior competition, he will be recognized by most Amazons in one fell swoop, and the Amazon Queen will also be on stage to watch the entire competition tomorrow. However, not to mention that Shenan is just a human boy. Even if he had the power to defeat her 3 days ago, he would never be able to stand out in the competition, and the possibility of being ugly is even higher. After all, tomorrow's competition will not test one-on-one combat, but the comprehensive performance of physical fitness and technical skills. Your Highness, you will destroy yourself by doing this. Antiope couldn't help shouting. Of course she is not worried about Shenan tomorrow, but now the relationship between Diana and Shenan is almost a prosperous one and a destructive one. Let a human boy who has only been trained for 3 days participate in a warrior competition and compete with the bravest and most powerful Amazon warriors. Even Antiope can't imagine what it would be like. That's it. Diana said this softly and firmly, then turned and left, leaving Antiope standing alone in a daze. In the ancient circular building, Shenan sat on the bed placed in the main hall, waiting for the arrival of Aunt Diana. The reward given by his aunt every night has allowed him to survive these days of hard training during the day. After all, who can resist the Wonder Woman version of the divine pillow? In addition, the rewards are different every night. The difference lies in the aunt's clothes. When my aunt came here on the first day, she was wearing golden royal clothes, like a noble and elegant god. Shenan felt that even moving a finger was blasphemy. When my aunt appeared here the next day, her clothes were changed into a white knee-length gauze skirt with ancient Greek characteristics. It looks pure and beautiful, like a white peony. An ordinary gauze skirt made of thin and soft fabrics and a royal dress with gorgeous workmanship have completely different feel. As for the third night, it was last night. My aunt was wearing the corset top and leather skirt that she used to wear during training. The tight-fitting corset only covered half of her upper body, revealing her slim waist with healthy and intact skin. So, although the first 3 nights were all about simple hugs, there was an indescribable difference between them. Shenan felt a surge of anticipation and burning in his heart. At this moment, a familiar sound of footsteps came from the corridor. He looked up. Diana was wearing a red armor dress for battle tonight, which was the outfit she wore when she transformed into a superhero. She also carried a long sword, a round shield and other exclusive weapons behind her. "Aunt, are we leaving Paradise Island?" Shenan quickly stood up and asked curiously. "No, we will set off after tomorrow morning." Diana looked straight at him and said, "Tomorrow morning, you will go to participate in the Amazon warrior competition." "Okay." Shenan simply nodded. "Do you know what a warrior competition is?" Diana raised her heroic eyebrows. Shenan spread his hands and responded bluntly, "I vaguely heard the female warrior say something, but I don't know the specific content." "You don't even know the content, so you promised me." Diana came close to Shenan and asked with her left hand gently holding his face. Shenan smiled and said, "And arranged it, so there must be a reason for it." "That's it," Diana said. "Tomorrow, you will not only participate, but also find a way to get the first place." "I'm afraid this is a bit difficult." Shenan's confidence was seriously insufficient. Although he didn't know much about the competition, he still knew that this was a competition between female warriors. "What if it's like this?" Diana said, and suddenly lowered her proud head. "Huh." Shenan's pupils shrank like the universe collapsed. He could clearly smell the fragrance of violets nearby, and a little bit of excellent warmth came from his somewhat dry lips. "Woo." Shenan's eyes opened as wide as possible, looking at the beautiful face close at hand, his eyes suddenly turned into a godly ice silver. He held the familiar small waist with both hands, and his black hair tended to an unreal silver, growing wildly and falling on his shoulders. At this moment, Shenan seemed to have awakened to something, and the surging invisible power of the demigod surged outward, shaking off some dust on the mother box not far away. Ability, the master of the followers. Triggered. The next day, early morning. When the first ray of golden sunlight in the sky fell on Paradise Island, the main island area became abuzz with excitement. The female warriors who were in drills or on duty on weekdays were fully armed, and the beautiful female civilians in white long skirts gathered together to form a huge crowd, converging on a large ancient building on one side of the coast. The entire building resembles an open-air ancient arena, with a flat and empty super square in the middle. Amazons filled the several stone steps surrounding the square. "Quiet, Her Majesty the Queen has arrived." As Antiope's shout rang out, the sounds on the field immediately fell silent. Under the focus of countless admiration, respect, and love, Queen Hippolyta, the supreme ruler of the Amazons, wearing a crown symbolizing power, appeared on an independent platform on the side of the arena, sitting majestically and gracefully on the golden throne. "Her Royal Highness the Princess is here." Antiope, standing on the platform, continued to shout. Diana in golden royal attire appeared behind the queen, and all the Amazons almost subconsciously looked above her head. There is no silver crown as before, only a gorgeous flower crown as a substitute, which is worn on her black hair. Your Royal Highness, you really gave your crown to humans. That's the Amazon royal family's artifact, the Flying Star Crown. The Queen actually agreed. Why does this happen? Seeing this scene, the Amazons in the gladiatorial square immediately started talking in an uproar, with looks of shock or confusion on their faces. In the past few days, only some Amazonians have seen it, and more have only heard about it. But now, they saw with their own eyes that Diana replaced the crown with a flower crown, and it was still difficult to accept this fact for a while. With a smile on her face, Diana stood gracefully beside the Queen's seat, still holding her head high, showing her confidence and beauty, and she was still the strongest and most beautiful pearl of the Amazon family. Let's get started. Queen Hippolyta seemed not to hear the comments and said calmly. Antiope nodded, immediately jumped down from the 10-meter-high suspended platform, and announced loudly, the competition is about to begin. Now, please invite the participants. The tall and strong female warrior, wearing light leather armor, walked into the center of the square from the gate of the arena, enjoying the attention and applause of the Amazons. 8 participating female warriors stood in a row on the square. Antiope glanced behind them in surprise, but Shenan was not there. Have you changed your mind? That's fine too. Antiope breathed a sigh of relief and looked up at Diana on the platform. But he found Diana with a smile on her face, still staring in the direction of the arena gate, her beautiful eyes shining brightly. That's not right. Before Antiope could lower his head, he heard the enthusiastic applause in the arena suddenly stop. From the Queen of the Amazons to the commoners of the Amazons, they all looked at the main entrance of the arena. There, a figure finally stepped on the entry time and appeared in the huge gladiatorial square. Shenan, who has long silver hair, is wearing white casual clothes with leggings, a very conspicuous crown on his head, and an ancient sword with 2 dragons biting each other's handles on his back. As long as they are Amazons, everyone knows that sword. It was called the Sword of the God of Fire, and was made by the god of fire Hephaestus. It was a powerful artifact that could kill the gods. The meaning represented by this divine sword is far more profound than the Phaeton star crown. The former is a symbol of Diana's power, and the latter is Diana's identity and honor. At this moment, these 2 exclusive artifacts are in the body of a human boy. In this competition, there will be no real battle game, and the weapons you bring will basically not be used. Therefore, this represents Princess Diana behind him. Queen Hippolyta looked at Shenan, who appeared last, with a hint of surprise in her eyes. She never thought that they would meet for the first time on this occasion. In the gladiatorial square, Antiope glanced at the contestants, including Shenan. Now that everyone is here, the competition is about to. Wait a minute. Shenan suddenly raised his hand and asked curiously, can you tell me the content and rules of the competition? There was sudden silence in the square. The female warriors participating in the competition are all stupid. They don't know the content and rules. You are participating in the competition, a hammer. Antiope frowned, suppressed his temper, raised his hand and explained, it's very simple. From the square here is the initial starting point, swim through the sea outside, and land on the beach from the other side of the island. Beach. The horses were prepared, and they used bows and arrows to hit the 3 targets set on the road. Finally, whoever returns to the square first through the main entrance of the arena and throws the spear here through the ring of the arena building, whoever is the winner. Worried that Shenan didn't hear clearly, Antiope said slowly, do you understand? If you don't understand anything, I'll talk to you again. No need, let's start quickly. Shenan waved his hand, looking very casual. Antiope couldn't bear to watch any more, gritted his teeth and said, I declare that the game has officially begun. The words just fell. Except for Shenan, who was still standing there, the other 8 female warriors rushed out quickly. They climbed the dozens of meters of ladders set up in front of the square, preparing to use the ladders to enter the sea area adjacent to the arena. Looking at Shenan, who was motionless, many people thought that he had simply given up. Seeing that a female warrior was about to climb to the top of the cloud ladder, Shenan was ready to set off, and he was seen squatting slightly. The next moment, Antiope's face changed nearby. She could really feel that Shenan seemed to have changed into a different person. His eyes were as sharp and calm as a god, and his aura changed from the original harmless to a fierce pressure with actual energy. Divine power, how is it possible? Antiope exclaimed. Bang! With divine power flowing, Shenan feet exerted force, and the whole person jumped up 20 to 30 meters and landed on the top of the empty cloud ladder. His long silver hair fluttered wildly against the strong wind, and Shenan sprinted forward and jumped to the other side of the 100-meter sea. Step. Shenan landed in the shallow water area of the sea, followed by a step, and the seawater burst and splashed, arriving at the place where the horse and bow were prepared. He did not choose to ride a horse, nor did he pick up a longbow. After all, there was no need for that. Shenan picked up 3 arrows and rushed up the mountain road at a very fast speed, faster than the horse. He saw the first target along the way. Shenan did not stop, but threw an arrow with his bare hands, and shot it through the wind, undoubtedly hitting the bull's eye. A blue smoke representing him rose into the sky like a wolf smoke. Unlike the first time he got the power of his ant, perhaps it was the second time he got this power, or it was the result of training in the past few days. At this time, Shenan seemed to be a demigod since birth. He continued to run along the mountain road, passing the remaining mountain road levels with a speed and physical fitness far beyond that of humans. In the arena, although Shenan's figure could not be seen, everyone could clearly see that the 3 blue smoke representing Shenan rose from different islands in less than 10 seconds. The Amazons on the field were stunned, as if they were witnessing a miracle. Finally, a second color of smoke appeared in the sky. At the same time, the main entrance of the arena. Stirring up the rolling dust along the way, the semi-god Shenan rushed into the square with a residual image. From departure to return, it took less than a minute. Finally, finish this and it's over. Shenan came to Antiope, who was still in a daze, took the spear that was not yet ready from her hand, and threw it at the golden ring in front with all his strength. Wait, the ceremony is not yet completed, Antiope said in shock. But it was too late, the spear turned into a stream of light and pierced through the air. Gurgle. At this time, a golden goddess statue rose from the center of the square, and the spear thrown by Shenan hit its chest and penetrated it. The deflected spear knocked off a corner of the metal ring, sparks flew, and then disappeared in the distant sky. Did I do something bad? Shenan looked at the hole in the middle of the goddess statue and touched the back of his head embarrassedly. Queen Diana, all Amazons. At noon, the sun hangs high in the blue sky like a fireball. Outside Paradise Island, I have just finished my 5-day sea tour and am on the way back on a giant cruise ship. Facing the moist and cool sea breeze, the extremely beautiful woman wearing a white dress with slit shoulders and the young boy who changed into his modern uniform returned to the side of the third deck without the tourists noticing. Auntie, I'm sorry, I messed up. Shenan drooped his ears like a little emperor. He could see the Amazon Queen's blue and ugly face in the morning. After all, that was a heavy loss that Paradise Island had never experienced in its thousands of years. Just be more careful in the future, Diana said softly without blaming her. Definitely next time. But, do I still have another chance? Shenan's mouth twitched, and the memory of Antiope's uncontrollable anger and the dumbfounded look of the female warriors and civilians came to mind. If he goes to Paradise Island again, he won't be beaten, right? Of course not. Diana smiled slightly, looked at a sea area that was getting further and further away, and said softly, "They have actually recognized you and welcome you to come next time. I will take you there again later. Let's meet the queen at the palace." Shenan looked at Aunt Diana's side face, and her heart beat unsatisfactorily. My aunt is already pretty, and when she smiles, she becomes even more beautiful. The seductive curve of the mouth made Shenan recall the unspeakable scene last night. An electric shock-like warmth emerged from the corners of his mouth, spreading out bit by bit and quickly infecting every part of his body. One kiss and you step into the transcendent. Shenan, who entered demigod mode, opened his silver eyes wide and looked at Wonder Woman, who was nearby with a calm and natural face. Let's consider this as a reward for hugging tonight. She raised her head slightly, and Wonder Woman's voice was somewhat unstable, revealing that she was not as calm as she seemed on the surface, and she seemed to be speaking to herself. However, this is also for you to inherit my power. Yes, that's all. Regardless of whether this is self-deception or not, it is a valid reason after all. A valid reason to briefly cross that boundary that makes me feel at ease at this moment. So that's how it is, Shenan said to himself, his divine silver eyes concealing his fiery inner emotions. He suddenly said, "Not enough. What? Wonder Woman was stunned and looked at Shenan blankly. There are not enough media. Shenan was extremely calm, and suddenly stood on tiptoes, holding on to the softness that was revealed due to surprise. Yeah, the media isn't enough, and there's nothing we can do about it. Wonder Woman's eyes were also calm. She exhaled the hot breath helplessly, then lowered her head without any obstruction and offered something softer and sweeter. The bright silver moonlight fell into the main hall. On the stone altar, the mother box that had been left for thousands of years remained silent. Return to Washington. After simply cleaning up the house, Diana went out to work. In fact, Diana's job needs to be changed every few years. In the past, Shenan didn't know the reason, but now he fully understands that with his aunt's ageless physique, if she stays in one place for several years, even if she is covered up by magical powers, her unusualness may be exposed. Fortunately, with Diana's excellent conditions, she doesn't have to worry about finding a job. Currently, it seems that he serves as a shareholder in a well-known local private law firm in Washington. After Shenan took a shower at home, he turned on his mobile phone that had been turned off for 5 days. As soon as the phone is turned on, countless messages pop up on the screen. This scared Shenan so much that he almost thought he had a virus. Before he could check the messages on his phone, the doorbell suddenly rang at the door of his house. Shenan curiously went over to open the door and saw a strong white young man standing at the door of his house with a pet bag in his arms. The other party didn't know whether it was because he hadn't slept well, but he looked a little depressed, and his eyes had obvious dark circles. Who are you? Don't wait for him to ask questions. The white young man danced with his hands and feet, made weird body movements, and said randomly, "Hello. Is this the prince's house? This is where Miss Diana Prince lives. My name is Barry Allen." Barry Allen, Shenan remembered. He remembered that his aunt said that he would entrust Xiao Huang to a friend to take care of him for a few days. "This is yours." Barry opened the zipper of the pet bag in his arms, and suddenly, a small orange figure jumped out. Wait, Barry was surprised and was about to use his ability. But he soon discovered that not only did the orange beast figure throw itself into the boy's arms without any malice, but it also kept rubbing its little head into the armpit, making an aggrieved meow sound just like a real cat. Ha ha ha, Xiao Huang, how are you these days? Shenan couldn't help but laugh, reaching out and rubbing its soft furred head vigorously. Barry's eyes were straight, looking at the harmless kitten. If it weren't for the battle of wits and courage he had with this little guy these past few days, and the fact that his speed force wasn't afraid of the element devouring ability, even if it still took a lot of effort, he would have almost thought that this was really just an ordinary kitten. Well, you know what's special about it, right? Barry asked directly. Shenan looked at the cute and coquettish Xiao Huang in his arms and nodded without concealment. Okay, since it is safe and sound here, it couldn't be better. Barry breathed a sigh of relief and was about to turn around and leave, waving his hand and saying, "I'll go first." Wait, Shenan stopped him and smiled and stretched out his hand. "My name is Shenan Prince. Thank you very much. It must be very tiring to take care of this little guy. How should I put it, it is also cute." Looking at Xiao Huang, Barry held Shenyan's hand and said sincerely and quickly, "Besides, Miss Diana once helped my father, so it is only natural for me to help take care of the pet." Shenyan, right, my home is not far from here, just on the 26th on the Central Street. If you have the chance in the future, you are welcome to come to my house and sit down. I remember, little brother. If I have the chance in the future, I will bring Xiao Huang to see you. Shenan waved goodbye. Ah, Xiao Huang, forget it. Of course, I am still very welcome if you come. Barry's eyes twitched. After watching Barry enter the elevator and leave, Shenan blinked his eyes, lowered his head and said to the little emperor in his arms, "What a good person, isn't he?" Meow, the little emperor shouted indignantly, as if he couldn't beat him. It seems that he is also a person with extraordinary power. Shenan thought thoughtfully. After so many things, he was no longer surprised to meet extraordinary people. After all, who in the family is not extraordinary now? Putting Xiao Huang on the sofa aside, Shenan lay on the comfortable soft back and turned on his mobile phone to check the information that he had not yet had time to check. Most of the bombing messages come from personal social media on Twitter, and there are also some mobile text messages. Shenan's popularity in school is actually very average. The only person who would go out of his way to find him on Twitter and send out a massive amount of viral messages was someone he had played with since childhood. Good brother, childhood sweetheart Gwen. Shenan quickly flipped through the messages on his phone and found that what Gwen had sent at first were all Christmas greetings and some photos of family and personal holidays. Flip your finger over the photo. Hey, Gwen's personal photo in pink bunny pajamas looks good, quite eye-catching. Shenan casually clicked on the collection. During this period, after Gwen noticed that he did not reply to the message, she sent a message to confirm safety and called him. On the third day, Gwen thought that Shenan was missing. Officer George couldn't help but check for the sake of his daughter, and then he found out that Shenan and his family had gone abroad. It is estimated that Officer George has completely targeted him now. Shenan smiled bitterly and quickly replied to the message, "Sorry, Gwen. I made you worry. My aunt and I went on vacation. Because we were leaving in a hurry, I forgot to tell you." He just clicked send on his message, and in less than half a second, Gwen replied, "Huh. If an apology is useful, what else do you need the police to do? I need sincere compensation. Okay, when the time comes, you will propose compensation conditions, and I will satisfy you if I can." Shenan knew that he was wrong and immediately agreed happily. "Gwen, that's right, I have to think about the conditions carefully. Don't try to cheat then." "Okay." Shenan finished replying and continued to browse other Twitter messages. He discovered that schoolgirl Kara Danvers also sent a blessing message on Christmas night. However, there was no second message after that. The last update on Kara's personal Twitter was as of Christmas Eve 5 days ago, and it seems that it has not been online since then. "You're not going to go on vacation abroad?" Shenan pondered for a moment and tapped the screen with his fingers to reply to the message. First, I apologized and explained why I didn't reply to the message, added a belated Christmas greeting, and finally asked about the other person's health and travel status. As a senior, I care. After 3 consecutive rounds, Shenan looked through the class discussion group information again and found that the instructor in the class had updated the class information. The group tour originally scheduled for mid-January next year has been moved forward to January 1st next year, New Year's Day. And today is the penultimate day of 2009. Isn't this a week-long Christmas vacation, a day of school, and then a 3-day trip to New York in a group? Shenan was speechless, and now he still had some doubts about traveling. He thought that as long as it was really just travel, it would be fine. Don't be like the previous 2 so-called tourist trips where you were either forced to save the world or forced to do hard training, which is far from the purpose of tourism such as entertainment and relaxation. After reading and responding to the information on Twitter, Shenan was bored and started browsing news online again. This look, Shenan couldn't help but open his eyes in surprise, straightened his back subconsciously, and sat upright on the sofa. His face was solemn, and he quickly scrolled down the news information on his mobile phone. During the few days that Shenan stayed on Paradise Island, there were 2 things that caused a stir on the internet. First thing, about the superhero Captain America, Steve Rogers. Due to the death of former U.S. Secret Service agent Peggy Carter due to illness, Captain America, who recovered from the iceberg and disappeared for more than 70 years, made his first appearance in front of the public as one of the pallbearers. The lovers of the same generation have aged in appearance and lost their bodies, but as the first superhero to break through the boundaries of humanity, Captain America is still as young as a young man in his early 20s. Without peers and comrades fighting together, that promise can never be fulfilled. This is an extremely cruel thing for a superhero. Captain America, who has traveled across time and arrived in the 21st century, is also a question as to where he should go. The second thing is about the God on Earth in the metropolitan city. Superman. Ever since Superman became famous after his battle against the Kryptonian battleships and forces more than half a year ago, he has been helping mankind with his superhuman power, and is worshipped by many people as a god on Earth. But in recent days, the trend of fallacies has completely changed. Due to excessive destruction of buildings and accidental injuries to humans, some citizens of Metropolis began to publicly protest, and the Metropolitan Court announced that it would publicly summon Superman for interrogation. The trial day is scheduled for January 2nd next year. Superhero Superman is likely to be convicted and imprisoned. After reading the two major news items, Shenan couldn't help but frown. There are more and more extraordinary beings resurrecting in the world. The extraordinary can only be fought against the extraordinary, and the extraordinary will be feared and questioned by ordinary people. The Earth's world is experiencing internal and external troubles, just like the invisible trend of the times. Are we going to prepare some precautionary measures? Shi Young whispered to himself and looked at Xiao Huang, who was sleeping soundly on the sofa next to him. The young element devouring beast, the sleeping venom. If the ant is not included, it is obviously not stable enough. Shenan fell into thinking. No matter what, he must protect the people around him. Under this premise, he is fearless even if his opponent is an old god, an alien, a supernatural being, or a monster. 2 days later, January 1st, New Year's Day. This is the first day of the new year 2010. The weather is clear and sunny. In previous years, January is also the coldest month, but this year, the global climate is out of balance, and the temperature continues to rise as soon as the new year arrives. The temperature outside is more like autumn, and many students have taken off their heavy windbreakers and cotton-padded jackets. At noon, a school bus painted in a conspicuous yellow stopped at the gate of the middle school. The male instructor stood at the school gate with a megaphone in his hand and shouted, "Students in our class, hurry up, take your luggage and find seats on the bus." Students came out of the teaching building one after another and boarded the school bus. "Shenan, what are you still doing? Get on the bus." The male instructor suddenly shouted to a place. "Here we come." Shenan rushed out of the teaching building with his school bag on his back. He just dropped by Kara's classroom, only to find that she didn't come to class today. Kara hadn't responded to his messages since Christmas Eve, and the school had also taken sick leave. This was undoubtedly worrying. When Shenan got on the bus, he glanced at the thermos cup in the male instructor's hand, and his eyes twitched slightly. Why put a photo of him wearing women's clothes and fighting against abomination on the mouth of the thermos cup? Who can stand this? Shenan sighed, and just as he entered the school bus, he saw Gwen waving at him from a seat slightly to the back. The seat next to her, which made the male and female classmates in the class jealous, was occupied by his small school bag. Shenan immediately waved and went to the seat next to Gwen. "Everyone sit tight, ready to go." With the male instructor's strong and powerful reminder, Shenan's trip to New York will also kick off. Ding! The bus horn sounded a signal whistle, and the school bus at the school gate started slowly and merged into the main road to New York City. On the bus, the students looked at the city scenery passing by on both sides, and they could not suppress their excitement and joy. They talked and discussed among themselves. "Quiet down. Dear students, please be quiet first." The instructor and a very young teacher stood on the bus platform next to the driver's seat. He put down the thermos cup with the photo of the silver-haired goddess, and shouted to the noisy car with a loudspeaker. The students in the school bus immediately quieted down and looked curiously at the young teacher they had never seen before. Gwen, as the class monitor, obviously knew more information. She whispered to Shenan, "That's the new instructor assistant." At this time, the instructor with a bit of a macho look grinned and said, "Classmates, I believe you all know who I am. However, I will introduce myself again. I am the instructor of this class, Roth Harrington. You can call me Teacher Harrington, or just call me Instructor." Male instructor Roth Harrington clapped his hands enthusiastically. "I am responsible for arranging all matters for the class's collective outing. I am both a teacher and a tour guide. If you have any questions, just come to me. Don't be embarrassed. Also, I'll tell you a secret. I am a loyal fan of the silver-haired goddess." Instructor Roth smiled. The photo was directly pasted on the thermos cup. Who doesn't know this so-called secret? However, the last joke of Instructor Roth immediately caused a burst of laughter from the students in the car, breaking the barriers between him and many students and shortening the distance. In one of the back seats, Shenan patted his forehead, looking hopeless. No need. By the way, let me introduce myself to you." After creating a friendly atmosphere, Instructor Roth immediately patted the young man standing next to him. "This is my temporary assistant and the deputy instructor of this class travel activity. Introduce yourself to the classmates." Instructor Roth raised his eyebrows and gestured. The young man with a little beauty stubble nodded. He took a step forward, stood where the students' eyes were focused on the school bus, and suddenly opened his hands with a serious face. Hello, my name is Quentin Beck, you can also call me Mysterio, in fact, I am a traveler from a parallel universe. Quote. All the students in the car were stunned. Shenan opened his eyes wide and stared at the young man. No way, I met a fellow countryman. Bang. Instructor Roth patted Quentin Beck's head and explained helplessly, everyone, please forgive your deputy instructor. He has a bit of a middle school syndrome. Quentin Beck smiled and said, how was my acting just now? It was quite real. My dream when I was a child was to be an actor, a Hollywood stuntman. The students looked at each other, not knowing how to respond. Don't look at him like this. Instructor Roth came out to smooth things over and said, he has recently applied for a position at Stark Industries. Maybe he will join Stark Industries as a technician soon after he finishes being your deputy instructor. Stark Industries, technician. Hearing this, the students applauded with admiration and longing. In Stark Industries, no matter what position, they are the best in the world. The most important thing is that the salary is definitely not low. And the gold content of the technician is definitely higher than that of a university professor. Shenan subconsciously touched his nose. It seems that he has exiled the big boss of Stark Industries to another dimension. Although, it was in a state of 3-in-1 at that time. After the two instructors finished their self-introductions and got along well with the students, the school bus quickly drove into the highway, and the car began to gradually quiet down. The school bus is not as fast as airplanes and trains, and it takes at least 3 or 4 hours to reach New York. The curtains on the windows on both sides of the car were drawn, and the light and shadow in the car immediately dimmed a lot. Many students closed their eyes and slept or played with their mobile phones in the car. It was quiet and only the sound of the school bus could be heard. Shenan originally wanted to lie down and take a nap. At this time, Gwen, who was sitting next to him, came close and whispered in his ear, remember, what we agreed on the day before yesterday. The day before yesterday. Shenan was stunned for a moment, and soon remembered that Gwen wanted to compensate. What compensation do you want? Tell me. Shenan nodded happily. Childhood sweethearts are also considered brothers. When I got on the bus just now, my ankle seemed to be twisted, and it hurts a little. Gwen blushed and whispered a little difficult to say. It's just a small thing, what kind of compensation is that? Put your feet up and I'll help you rub them. Shenan said directly without thinking too much. Quote. Gwen hesitated, then bit her lower lip slightly, and confirmed her inner thoughts. The short-haired beautiful girl sat in the window seat, so she turned sideways with her back to the window with the curtains drawn, and reached down to take off her black short boots. She pulled the trouser legs of her denim shorts slightly with her hands, lifted her feet and bent them, and gently placed them on the legs of Shenan sitting next to her. Shenan was stunned. In fact, the moment Gwen took off her boots, he realized that something was wrong. Maybe it was because the weather was getting warmer. Today, Gwen was wearing a dress top and denim shorts, and her feet were wrapped in warm black tights. So, now when Shenan lowers his head, he can see a pair of beautiful legs of a girl tightly wrapped in light pantyhose. Shenan is not a foot control. But at this moment, his heart suddenly accelerated, with a look of surprise in his eyes. Gwen's legs are already slender. Now take a closer look, the calves are straight and slender, showing a 12-point beautiful and flexible curve from the legs to the ankles. And the most beautiful part of the legs, even Shenan can't see it in the past. That is the girl's small and delicate feet. Wrapped in high-quality black silk, the 5 fingers are like slightly shiny jewels, and the arc has not changed at all, perfect as a work of art. It's there, it's twisted. Gwen pointed to his right ankle with his own little thoughts. I know. Shenan took a deep breath and calmed down. Gwen is his brother, Gwen is his brother. Shenan muttered silently, and reached out and held Gwen's right foot without hesitation. The girl's feet were very small, and his hands could cover them all, just like holding a warm, cool and smooth gem. Shenan took the girl's small right foot and massaged it gently. Gwen's face was already blushing, and what she proposed at the moment made her feel that it was really too bold. And the moment her feet were held and massaged by Shenan, the girl's body stiffened, and her feet felt a strong shock like an electric shock. Wait. Gwen bit her lips and almost couldn't help jumping directly from the seat. Popularize an animal knowledge. The spider's feet are the most sensitive. Because there are sensitive vibration receptors on the thighs, spiders can detect any slight movement from the spider silk under their feet. Bang! The school bus suddenly shook violently, waking up many students, and the driver's apologetic voice came, "Sorry, students, the speed is too fast." Chapter 51. Inside a yellow school bus traveling at high speed. "Gwen, have you been doing any exercise recently? Like yoga or something like that?" Shenan asked curiously while gently rubbing Gwen's feet, which felt very good. The small and delicate feet in his hands were almost soft and boneless, but through the 5 fingers, the black silk with a faint shiny flesh color could be clearly felt, and the other's feet would rebound with subtle muscle toughness every time the palm exerted force to rub, as if it was instinctively resisting the invasion of the palm. "Yes." Gwen bit her lower lip tightly and responded as soft as a mosquito. "When did you do it?" Shenan asked doubtfully, and his fingers began to massage the intact and slender ankle. He was basically with Gwen at school on weekdays, but he didn't see Gwen participating in any school sports. "Woo," Gwen murmured subconsciously. "On the rooftop." "No, I just do aerobics in my bedroom occasionally." "Is that so?" Shenan didn't think much, nor did he have the energy to think much. Most of his attention was now on Gwen's perfect and small left foot. This was even more comfortable than when he was stroking the little emperor. In a trance, Shenan's original rubbing action was unconsciously changed to stroking. His fairly large palm wrapped around the entire flexible and white foot, and then slid up along the high-quality black silk. Shenan's 5 fingers stretched out a little greedily, feeling the delicate and smooth feeling coming from his fingertips. Woo! The feeling and stimulation of this time far exceeded the sum of the previous ones. The girl was struck by lightning. Her eyes were shining with crystal water, and her small mouth with sharp tiger teeth opened and bit Shenan's shoulder fiercely. Shenan felt pain, and then reacted, and quickly released Gwen's little foot. Woo! Gwen bit Shenan and suppressed the sound that almost screamed out just now. Shenan smiled bitterly and let her bite. The school bus was still quiet at a constant speed, and no one noticed this scene. After a long time, Gwen finally let go of her mouth, and then put her legs down, with a face full of shame and anger, pretending to sit in the seat as if nothing had happened. "I'm sorry, Gwen, I didn't mean it." Shenan looked at the girl with apology, but didn't explain too much. It's impossible to say that he mistook her for a little emperor, right? Gwen didn't respond, nor did she look at Shenan, but calmly stretched out a finger to indicate. Shenan understood what she meant in an instant, and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "I owe you a compensation, right?" "No problem. As long as it's not rubbing your legs. It's not that my brother is not strong, but I really can't stand it." Shenan felt that if he continued to rub, he might suddenly awaken some strange hobby. "Is your shoulder okay?" Gwen was angry for only 3 seconds, and then she looked at Shenan's shoulder with concern, and took out a tissue to wipe off the wetness on it. "It's okay, I have thick skin." Shenan glanced at his shoulder. In fact, Gwen didn't bite it hard. There was only a tooth mark on the jacket, and the flesh underneath was not bitten deeply. Otherwise, the Lord of the Dependents might be triggered again. However, Gwen is just an ordinary person, and even if it is triggered, it shouldn't cause any trouble. "Shenan, what is on your left hand?" Gwen seemed to have forgotten the embarrassing thing just now, and returned to the calm and intellectual cold lady, looking down at Shenan's left hand. "Ah, are you talking about this?" Shenan noticed that the long sleeve of his left hand was pulled up a little, revealing the silver bracelet worn on the front of his arm. Its name is the Guardian Silver Bracelet artifact. The Guardian Silver Bracelet is made of fragments of Zeus's shield, which can withstand all physical and magical attacks. When the arms are crossed, it can generate a powerful shield barrier and shock wave. Even for my Aunt Diana, who is dressed in divine attire, the ranking of the Guardian Silver Bracelet is only second to the sword of the God of Fire. Of course, the Guardian Silver Bracelet is a pair of linked ones. If there is only one, its power will obviously be greatly reduced. But because of this, even in a human body, he can barely use the basic ability of this half artifact. "This is the lucky charm my aunt gave me, for self-defense outside." Shenan smiled and pulled up his sleeves to cover the single Guardian Silver Bracelet. "Lucky charm," Gwen whispered softly. Somehow, she always felt that the peculiar silver bracelet seemed to have been seen somewhere before. New York, Manhattan. When the school bus arrived at the bustling downtown area of the destination, it was already approaching dusk. The warm sunset fell on the tall buildings, and neon lights were lit everywhere on the ground. Instructor Rhodes and the mysterious assistant arranged a group dinner in a restaurant, and then took the students to check in a residential apartment. By the time Shenan entered his own small single room with his school bag on his back, the sunset outside the window had completely disappeared, and the dark night began to cover the sky over this city that never sleeps. The first day in New York has not even started, but it is almost over. In the evening, it is free time, and students can go out for activities. But it is limited to the nearby streets, and they must return to the apartment before 2200, and the instructor will check the dormitory at that time. The instructor will not officially organize group play activities until tomorrow. Shenan sat on the single bed in the room. Just as he took out his mobile phone to send a message to his aunt that he had arrived safely in New York, there was a knock on the door. Shenan opened the door and saw who else but Gwen. However, the girl had already taken a shower, her short golden hair had not been completely dried, and she was wearing a dress uniform that looked intellectual and cool. After Shenan opened the door, Gwen crossed her arms and said, "Go out with me to buy clothes. This is the compensation I want. Didn't you bring enough clothes?" Shenan scratched his head. "Not yet." Gwen stopped talking halfway, glared at him unhappily, and then turned and walked downstairs. Shenan didn't understand, but still picked up his mobile phone and house key and followed him out the door. On the busy pedestrian street, Shenan followed Gwen around several clothing stores, and Gwen finally picked out a suitable little skirt. Shenan seemed to have finally realized it and paid for it with his half-month pocket money in advance. The effect was naturally significant. Seeing that Gwen was holding the packaging bag of the skirt all the way, he was obviously not angry anymore, and Shenan also smiled. But, just as Shenan and Gwen were returning to their apartment after buying clothes, they walked to a relatively remote residential area. Accompanied by intense and rapid panting and footsteps, a silver-haired boy with goggles on his forehead approached from behind. The silver-haired boy suddenly stuffed a women's bag to Gwen, and then pretended to hold the bag with his hands, panting and trying to rush to the other direction. Shenan and Gwen didn't know what happened yet, and saw a bearded man rushing past quickly and caught up with the silver-haired boy who had not yet run out of the current road. "Kid, where is my bag?" The bearded man grabbed the boy's shoulder angrily. "That's not yours, you stole it from someone else," the silver-haired boy retorted stubbornly. "Really?" The bearded man was furious, and immediately grabbed the silver-haired boy's collar with one hand and forcibly dragged him into a dark alley without road surveillance. "Shenan, take this." Seeing this, Gwen stuffed the clothes and bag to Shenan and quickly rushed to the alley. After taking a look at the things in his hand, Shenan followed without hesitation. In the dark, unmonitored alley, the bearded man dragged the silver-haired boy into the alley. His rough hands suddenly grabbed the boy's neck and pressed the boy's small body against the wall. As the big hand moved up little by little, the boy's feet began to leave the ground and he struggled violently. His hands kept pulling at the big hand, but the strength of an adult strong man and a 13-year-old boy was too different. "If you don't hand over the things, I will crush you to death," the bearded man whispered hoarsely. Bad guy," the silver-haired boy whimpered. "You were really looking for death." A fierce look flashed in the bearded man's eyes. Just when he was about to give the boy a memorable lesson, a beautiful figure suddenly appeared at the entrance of the alley. "Let him go." The short-haired girl looked at him coldly and shouted like a policeman. "Oh, another girl is here." Looking at the girl's delicate and beautiful face and her youthful and graceful figure, the bearded man's eyes showed a strong desire. But before she could take a few more glances, a black-haired boy also walked into the alley. He stood in front of the girl's body and intentionally blocked the bearded man's sight. "This is what you want, here you go, let him go." Facing the bearded man, Shenan showed the women's hanging bag in his hand. "That's right." The bearded man spit out a vicious sentence, loosened his big hand, and let the silver-haired boy who was constantly panting sit on the ground. "Shenan, why did you come here too?" Gwen lay lightly behind Shenan. The girl did not panic, but felt a sense of warmth. "It's impossible for a girl like you to face this situation." Shenan turned around and whispered, giving her a reassuring look. "Give it to me." The tall and strong bearded man approached Shenan and just glanced at the women's hanging bag, his eyes still vaguely cast at Gwen behind him. Take it. Shenan had a calm face and held the women's hanging bag in front of his chest with his right hand. Standing behind Shenan, Gwen narrowed her eyes and raised her right wrist slightly. Even if she would expose her own ability later, she would not allow others to hurt Shenan. The bearded man came to Shenan and subconsciously reached out to take it, but Shenan suddenly let go. The man's attention followed the bag falling to the ground. Shenan suddenly moved. He kicked up and kicked the opponent's lower abdomen hard. It should be said that the special training in Paradise Island for a few days finally came in handy at this time. The lower abdomen was kicked by the boy with all his strength. The bearded man groaned in pain and fell backwards with his hands holding his stomach. Shenan didn't make a move, but once he made a move, he would not stop until the opponent lost his ability to fight. Shenan stepped out decisively, landing on the 5 fingers of the bearded man's palm, making the opponent so painful that he couldn't even make a fist. Shenan thought about it, and then kicked the opponent in the stomach again, kicking the bearded man so hard that he almost vomited bile. All this was done simply and roughly. Shenan squatted down and quickly searched the other party's pockets and trouser pockets. After confirming that the other party did not carry a gun, he stepped over the big man who was lying on the ground and groaning, and grabbed the silver-haired boy's hand. Come with me and leave here. The silver-haired boy's eyes were shining all the time, and he immediately nodded obediently. Okay, big brother. Gwen, let's go. Shenan pulled the silver-haired boy, picked up the women's bag on the ground, and was about to leave here with Gwen. Before Shenan and the other 2 walked out of the alley, they were forced to retreat again. Outside the alley, a dozen tall and strong young men with dyed hair and tattoos, who were the kind of people who were not easy to mess with in the dark city, merged into the narrow alley like a human wall. Hey, isn't this Jackson? I haven't seen you for a long time. You're so pulled. You actually flipped over in the hands of a few kids. A young man with dyed hair glanced at the bearded man on the ground and said jokingly. Bah, that kid is a bit cruel. Don't let him go. Ah. The bearded man hadn't finished speaking when he was stepped on the back of his hand by Shenan, who had returned to the alley. 1, 2, 3, 11 people. Shenan protected Gwen and the silver-haired boy behind him and retreated to the front of the wall at the deepest part of the dead end. He glanced at it and his eyes fell on a long wooden board on the ground. He quickly lowered his body and grabbed the thin wooden board in his right hand like a sword. With the board in hand, Shenan felt a little more confident. But relying solely on the swordsmanship learned on Paradise Island and the current body of an ordinary human being, it was still too difficult to fight against 11 ruthless characters in society. Use a divine weapon. Shenan thought of the protective silver bracelet on his left hand, which contained a part of the divine power sealed by his aunt. If it was used, it would undoubtedly easily resolve this crisis. However, using a weapon of this level against humans can easily lead to death. It's not easy to use until the last moment. Not knowing that he had walked on the edge of death, 11 gangsters pressed forward. Just when Gwen couldn't help but expose her secret and use the power of Spider-Man. Beside him, Shenan suddenly whispered, Gwen, kiss me. Hey, Gwen was stunned. Hurry up, otherwise, I'll kiss you. Shenan said in a deep voice. What he thought was that although Gwen was just an ordinary person, it would be good to add some physical strength now. Gwen blushed, just when she made up her mind and was about to kiss Shenan. Something happened on the field. The boss is here. Someone suddenly shouted, and the 11 gangsters who were surrounded in the alley, including the bearded man lying on the ground vomiting bile, suddenly stood up against the walls on both sides and made way for a spacious and unobstructed path. Rode out. With compliments and enthusiasm on their faces, they stared in the direction of the alley entrance, bowed their heads one after another, and shouted in unison, Boss! Boss! Shenan frowned and looked forward with the silver-haired boy and Gwen. Soon the 3 of them were stunned. I saw only the entrance of the alley. A green-haired girl who was only 12 or 13 years old walked in calmly. The green-haired girl, I should say lowly. Her long green hair, whether natural or dyed, cascades down her shoulders casually. Her delicate, doll-like face has a heavy smoky makeup, making her look much older than her age. The young and exquisite Lolita wears a suspender top on her body, a pair of ultra-short hot pants covering her immature buttocks, and her two slender legs are covered with colorful pantyhose. The green-haired Lolita boss appeared in front of Shenan and his group in such a domineering manner. "Boss, them." The bearded man wanted to say something else. "Shut up." The green-haired loli glanced at him coldly. Her voice was clear and cold, and the man with the cheeks, who was twice as tall, immediately covered his mouth in silence. The green-haired loli walked into the alley without stopping, until she came to Shenan and his party. The green-haired loli's eyes were huge, with a layer of ice-like indifference, and she glanced at Shenan and the others. Her eyes paused on the silver-haired boy for a moment, then quickly moved away as if nothing had happened, and finally landed on Shenan, who was deliberately protecting the silver-haired boy and Gwen. "Tread." The green-haired loli raised 1 foot high, almost splitting her legs. Unfortunately, due to her limited height, her legs were a little short after all, and she could only barely step on the wall next to Shenan's elbow. "What's your name?" The green-haired loli leaned forward, tapped Shenan with her feet, and asked with interest. "Shenan." Shenan looked at her. "You remember." The green-haired loli grinned crazily and said, "My name is Lorna. I like you, so be my little brother." This is a very strange scene. In the alley shrouded in the night, 12 tall and sturdy social personnel stood obediently on the walls on both sides, and the leader was a green-haired girl who was only 12 or 13 years old. Whether it was the delicate and tender face of the green-haired girl or the cute and petite loli figure, she was far from the identity of a social boss, except for the smoky makeup on her face that was too mature. But looking at the green-haired girl who was full of rage at the moment, Shenan's eyes flashed with a trace of pity. The stronger the opponent's status and identity, the more it means that the girl must have suffered a lot, and she must be much stronger and harder than her peers to live to the present without being bullied. "Hey, do you hear me? Do you want to be my little brother?" Luna used her foot to knock Shenan face to face, but before she finished speaking, Shenan suddenly put his hand on her head and gently touched her green hair. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. This scene stunned everyone on the scene. Especially the 12 social workers with dyed hair and tattoos. They opened their eyes wide in surprise, many of them gasped and kept saying, "It's over, that kid is dead." Lorna paused for a moment, and didn't seem to react. Then, the girl slapped her hands off her head, retracted her feet on the wall, took a step back, and stared at Shenan coldly. "What are you doing?" There is dust on your head." Shenan naturally couldn't say that it was his subconscious action, it was a kind of pity from the heart. If he said it out, he would definitely be beaten. "Oh, so that's the case." Hearing Shenan's explanation, Luna nodded suddenly. A group of social workers. "Hey, boss, you don't really believe it, do you?" They chose to remain silent because they knew Luna's usual style of doing things. Just now, if any of them dared to touch the girl's head like that, the whole arm would have been crippled long ago. Obviously, people are treated differently. Shenan did not regard the girl as a social boss, and said bluntly, "Sorry. I can't be your little brother, and I don't have that intention." The hearts of the social personnel tightened again. Unexpectedly, the boss Luna was not angry, but took the initiative to make way for her body. The green-haired girl leaned against the wall on one side, waved her hand casually at the Shenan group who were surrounded, and said, "In this case, then you go." "You want to let us go?" Shenan was a little surprised. "If you don't leave, do you still want me to treat you to supper?" Luna snorted coldly. "Boss." The bearded man who was beaten just now saw that Luna really intended to let Shenan and the other two go, and he was immediately anxious and shouted unwillingly. "Make way, let them leave here," Luna said coldly, immediately intimidating the crowd. "Let's go." Shenan took Gwen and the silver-haired boy's hands respectively, and walked cautiously to the entrance of the alley. Under the intimidation of the green-haired girl Luna, no one dared to make a move. They could only watch Shenan and his group walk out of the alley and disappear on the street outside. When Shenan and his group walked away, they entered the alley. Luna suddenly said coldly, "Who told you to rob and beat the child?" "Pa." The bearded man knelt on the ground with his knees, and said in panic with a pale face, "Boss, I was wrong, I shouldn't." His words stopped abruptly. As if his throat was tightly strangled by an invisible big hand, the bearded man kept struggling and waving his limbs, and the whole person floated up inch by inch, exactly the same as the scene when he pinched the silver-haired boy just now. The powerful extraordinary power is reviving and descending. None of the other 11 people dared to speak, and they watched the bearded man leave the ground and float in the air 2 meters high with a chill on their backs. Deep in the alley, green light shone. Lorna's small body was still leaning against the wall, her green hair was frantically flying, and her raised hands were surrounded by materialized green light and fire. 10 seconds later, the bearded man lay in the alley like a dead dog, gasping for breath, tears, snot, and saliva flowing all over the floor. "No next time," Lorna's childish and cold voice sounded. "Yes, boss," everyone responded quickly with cold sweat. Shenan pulled Gwen and the silver-haired boy and ran away quickly until they ran out of the previous street and came to a relatively prosperous and lively area. They stopped when they confirmed that no one was chasing them. The crisis was finally resolved. Just as Shenan was about to say something, he saw the silver-haired boy looking at him with admiration, and said admiringly, "Brother, you were really awesome just now. You knocked down that bad guy in 2 moves. What's so awesome about that? I almost died there." Shenan laughed bitterly. "Little boy, you were really awesome. You dare to mess with such a big guy." Gwen scolded like a big sister. "Humph, I ran too slowly, otherwise, he would definitely not be able to catch up with me." The silver-haired boy was obviously unconvinced and said indignantly, "Also, who told him to rob others' things? I just helped others get their things back." He pushed the crooked windshield goggles on his head and smiled happily at the women's bag. "Not bad, when you grow up, you will definitely run faster than him," Gwen encouraged. "Of course." The silver-haired boy patted his chest confidently, looked at Shenan again, and suddenly remembered something and introduced himself. "Brother, my name is Pete Django Maximoff." "Pete, right," Shenan said that he knew, touched his fluffy silver hair and said, "It's late, you don't want to go out alone, go home, I will hand over the bag to the local police station." "Okay." Pete handed the women's bag to Shenan, and suddenly pulled Shenan aside, stuffed a piece of paper to him, and whispered mysteriously, "Brother, I will introduce my sister to you, she is definitely better than the one next to you." This, Shenan was stunned. "Ah." Pete suddenly felt pain, but Gwen walked up to him with a smile, pinched his ears with her hands, and stared at him and said, "Little boy, what are you talking about?" No, nothing." While speaking, Pete suddenly broke free from Gwen's hand and ran away along the street. Halfway through the run, he turned around and waved, saying, "Brother, remember. My sister is great. Are all the kids nowadays so precocious?" Gwen rubbed her fangs slightly, and said with some gritted teeth, "I should have known not to save him earlier." "Just a kid." Shenan couldn't help but laugh, and looked down at the piece of paper in his hand, which had a detailed address and phone number written on it. Gwen had an inexplicable ominous premonition, just like when she saw Kara, and couldn't help saying, "Shenan, you don't really plan to meet the sister he mentioned, do you?" "How is that possible?" Shenan shook his head and put the piece of paper given by Pete into his pocket. Under the neon lights, a girl of about 13 years old stood gracefully at the intersection waiting. If Shenan was there, he would definitely find that the girl and the green-haired girl boss he met just now have a little resemblance. However, the girl standing and waiting for something now has waist-length hair in bright red. The girl's face is also delicate and beautiful like a doll, but let alone smoky makeup, there is not even a bit of lipstick or eye makeup, and her face is as clean as freshly peeled white and tender fruit. The red-haired girl is also wearing an ordinary school skirt, looking elegant and calm, and she has the prototype of a beauty at a young age. Wanda, at this time, with a shout from afar. Peter, with silver hair, waved his arms and ran quickly from far to near to the red-haired girl. Wanda didn't say much, just looked at Peter calmly. Previously, Pete, who was not afraid of any occasion and dared to compete with social hooligans, immediately drooped like a roasted eggplant after seeing the look in his sister's eyes. It seemed that Pete was on the side of the younger brother. "I was born 12 minutes earlier." Pete was dissatisfied and was just trying to show off. "What trouble have you caused again?" Wanda asked softly. Pete shook his head violently and responded hesitantly, No trouble. Let's go home first." Wanda turned around and went back to a street. Pete hurriedly followed, and on the way home, he told Wanda what happened just now. Of course, the plot where he introduced his sister to Shenan was omitted. Wanda pondered for a moment and thought, is that so? If there is a chance in the future, I still have to thank some people in person. After all, saving you took a lot of risks. There is a chance. Pete smiled and said, I gave him our address. Okay. Wanda nodded lightly and went back to the 3-story house with lights on with Pete. The twins did not notice that when they entered the house, a green figure leaned against the wall on the corner of the street not far away. The door was closed, and through the shadow of the house window, you can vaguely see the reunion of a family of 4. The green figure continued to stand there for a while, and then turned around and disappeared into the night alone. After Shenan and Gwen went to the police station and handed over the women's bag, the two returned to the apartment almost on time, just in time for the instructor's dormitory inspection. Shenan couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. What happened tonight was also a close call. Next, there are 2 days of travel and vacation time. There shouldn't be any more accidents, right? People can't always be so unlucky, Shenan thought. But what he didn't expect was, at the same time, a huge change happened on the other side of New York City. New York City, Cathedral. The church with painted murals and magnificent atmosphere was brightly lit, and the pure music played by the cello flowed peacefully. Many celebrities were in the main hall, enjoying the sacred and peaceful atmosphere here. But, this tranquility and sacredness were soon broken. Clang! Holding a strong and sturdy man in a suit in one hand, the evil black-haired young man ignored everyone in the hall, and violently smashed the man in the suit in his hand on the table in the middle of the hall like a pig, and then took out an unknown black technology instrument to take away the other's pupils. Amid the chaos and screams at the scene, the evil young man looked normal, holding a metal scepter with a blue glow on the top, and walked out of the church door unhurriedly. As he walked, a dazzling golden light appeared on the body of the evil young man. The original suit uniform on his body was replaced by a golden armor with domineering horns, and a dark green cape fell down. Holding a scepter and wearing armor, the evil young man walked out of the church facing the gazes of hundreds of people outside. He seemed to feel that it was too noisy outside. He casually raised the metal scepter and flew out with a scorching and dazzling energy shell, blasting a police car on the road with the sirens honking. Kneel down, to the god who is about to dominate you. The evil young man opened his hands, showing an evil smile, and shouted as if announcing. The next morning, this is also the second day of the new year after New Year's Day, and it is the day for the Metropolitan Court to try Superman. New York City. The weather is still sunny and bright, and the city is still peaceful. Early in the morning, Instructor Roth and Deputy Instructor Mysterio organized students to visit the Statue of Liberty on Hudson Liberty Island. The Statue of Liberty is undoubtedly the first must-see attraction in New York, and the 2 major parks on the island made the student team spend a whole morning playing. It was noon. The instructor took the students back to Manhattan and headed to the most prosperous and modern Times Square. The school bus was parked in the parking space in front of the shopping mall. The female students who had been complaining about tired feet in the morning were immediately excited by the strong shopping desire and began to go shopping in small groups. Our classmate Shenan chose to sit on the rest chair on the 4th floor of the mall. Shenan looked at the classmates scattered in the cosmetics, clothing, game and other stores not far away, and looked at Gwen who was sitting quietly next to the chair, and asked curiously, "Don't you want to look at clothes again? I still have the energy to walk with you." "No need." Gwen shook her head gently, tucked her golden hair around her ears, and smiled, "The one you bought last night is enough." "Really?" Shenan's heart suddenly jumped. He looked at the beautiful outline of Gwen's face nearby, and suddenly found that the girl who grew up with him was really more beautiful now. Yes, sometimes, things that have become accustomed to will see its other side inadvertently. At this moment, Shenan suddenly realized why Officer George was so hostile to him. But, after realizing this, can he still simply regard Gwen as a good brother? Shenan was thinking about this, and suddenly, he saw Gwen shudder. Gwen's hair stood up, his pupils shrank slightly, and he looked out of the window of the shopping mall inexplicably. On the road at the entrance of the mall, all the cars stopped, and the drivers and passers-by on the street looked up at the sky together, their faces dull, and boundless fear enveloped their hearts. "What is that?" Many students and customers standing by the windows of the mall also looked up in surprise and pointed at the sky outside. Shenan and Gwen looked at each other, quickly stood up, and came to the French window of the mall. What caught Shenian's eyes was a huge blue beam of light. The blue beam of light shone from the top of the iconic building of Stark Industries headquarters several miles away, straight up. It went all the way into the sky above New York City, 10,000 meters above the city, and tore a dark and terrifying crack in the blue sky. From the abyss of the sky opened by the blue beam of light, countless unknown black dots came out one after another, densely descending on the city area below. Among them, dozens of flying black dots rushed straight to Times Square. New York, the most central and prosperous modern urban area. A huge blue beam of light soared into the sky, forcibly tearing open a black hole like an abyss in the sky. From the dark interior that seemed to lead to the deepest part of the universe, dense flying objects continued to spew out. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions sounded like the thunder of a large storm, and the unknown terror descended on the city unprepared. Buzz. Dozens of mysterious black spots are rapidly approaching Times Square. Among them, the target of one black spot happens to be the shopping mall building where Shenan is located. Shenan opened his eyes wide in surprise, and the mysterious black spot became larger and larger in his eyes from far to near. Approaching the last half-kilometer, you can see that it is an aircraft similar to the shape of a sea motorcycle. Although the tall being driving the aircraft could not be seen clearly, it was definitely not a human being. The entire surface of his body reflected the cold sheen of metal in the sunlight. Before the unknown aircraft completely entered the sky above the pedestrian street, a dazzling red flame was launched from the front, dragging the terrifying tail flame and rushing towards the building first. Careful, Shenian's reaction was quite quick. He immediately hugged Chingmei Gwen beside him and threw him back to the ground with all his strength. At the same time, a powerful and terrifying explosion air wave and shock wave energy erupted on the exterior wall between the third and fourth floors of the building. The window glass on the floor was instantly shattered, along with the seemingly hard reinforced concrete exterior. The wall and even the floor on the edge of the fourth floor collapsed with a rumble. Bang! The air waves carried the broken building fragments and swept inward. The flames began to burn in the huge hole in the front of the building, and thick black smoke quickly filled the space inside the mall. Ahem. Gwen, are you okay? Shenan was lying on the ground with ringing ears and coughed several times. The floor in front of him had collapsed, making him feel like he was on the edge of a cliff. However, these can no longer be taken care of. Just now. When Shenan threw Gwen to the ground, the girl in his arms suddenly twisted her body and acted as a human shield, protecting Shenan's back with her soft body. Therefore, Shenan himself was not injured. He stood up eagerly and looked around. Through the thick smoke, he could only see things within 2 meters, but Gwen could not be seen within the visual range. No way. Shenan's heart twitched violently. Tap. At this moment, a tall figure jumped in from the outside of the shopping mall building and landed on the 4th floor not far from Shenan, making a heavy metal sound. 2 emotionless red eyes first appeared in the smoke, and then, a nearly 2-meter-tall, metal-structured mechanical humanoid creature walked out of it, holding an energy gun that was not characteristic of Earth civilization. Its eyes kept moving and scanning, locking onto the humans in the mall like a killing weapon. You guy. Shenan's eyes turned red and he immediately rushed towards the alien robot. His left hand was clenched into a fist, and the artifact guardian silver bracelet covered by his sleeve was hot red, and in response to the little master's anger, it awakened and shimmered with divine light. But a figure moves faster than Shenan. Seeing that the alien robot and Shenan were about to collide with each other, the girl with short blonde hair and short uniform skirt moved forward. The girl forced herself between Shenan and the alien robot, and reached out to grab the metal arm of the alien robot. Bang! The girl, who was about 1.6 meters tall, threw her opponent to the ground with a single throw over her shoulder. The force was so strong that obvious cracks appeared on the floor. She jumped 2 meters quickly and vigorously. As her body fell down, her white fist violently hit the alien robot on the face. Kaka! The mechanical head created by the entire circuit, parts, crystals, etc. exploded with the surging current and shining sparks. Gwen. Shenan looked at the girl blankly. The force of this punch must have been on the ton level. Is this Gwen? Is it that Chingmei who occasionally asks him to twist open the cap of a drink bottle? That's a lie. Shenan was still in a daze. After finishing off an alien robot, Gwen took his hand and went into the smoke-filled shopping mall. There were screams and wailings inside and outside the shopping mall building, turning it into a tragic scene of hell on earth. Apparently there was more than one invading alien body, and there were dozens and hundreds of them in the area just on the square alone. Gwen pulled Shenan into an empty clothing store, quickly found a dressing room, and took Shenan into a small isolated dressing room. Gwen pulled open the backpack she had been carrying, and after opening the dark layer of the backpack, just as Shenan expected, there lay an extremely familiar, black and white, tight-fitting spider uniform inside. It turns out that the Spider-Man that night was Gwen. Shenan understood everything, but before he could speak, Gwen suddenly grabbed the hem of his uniform with both hands, lifted it up and took it off. The girl's upper body is well proportioned, showing beautiful and strong muscle lines from her tender and snow-white neck down to her waistline-lined abdomen. The most important thing is that the girl wears no other clothes underneath, and her snow-white and slender body can be seen almost at a glance. Wrong. Shenan also saw 2 ordinary band-aids, but instead of covering anything, the band-aids made the already well-developed Gwen reveal an aura he had never seen before. What a good brother. Turn around. Gwen suddenly seemed to react, blushing and glaring at Shenan, biting her lip as she was about to take off the rest of her dress. Well, this makes her look even more beautiful. Shenan turned around without hesitation. The current situation was indeed not the time to appreciate. There was a rustling sound behind him, and soon Gwen indicated that she had changed. Shenan looked back and saw that the person who appeared in front of him was the female Spider-Man he had encountered on the roof before. I will explain everything to you in the future. Now, I will take you and the people here to evacuate first. After putting on the female spider uniform, Gwen's voice changed a little, appearing capable and direct, giving people a sense of reliability and conviction. Okay. Shenan had no objection. Students, gather together and don't run around. In a corner of the shopping mall, Instructor Roth and Assistant Mysterio, although they were also terrified, still led the protection of most of the students. Ta-ta-ta. The red electronic pupils flickered in the smoke. An alien robot scanned and found them, and immediately rushed over. Before it got close, it fired continuously, and several white lasers smashed the stone pillars and guardrails in front of it. The students screamed and retreated, but soon their backs were facing a wall. Mysterio gritted his teeth and stood firmly in front of the students with Instructor Roth. At the critical moment, 2 white spider silks shot out from the area behind the alien robot, sticking to the metal arms of the alien robot. Under the powerful force, the alien robot was thrown out of the building as if it was retreating. With a swoosh, Spider-Man jumped lightly in front of the instructor and students, waving and shouting, "Everyone follow me." Shenan picked up the energy gun that the alien robot had dropped from the ground and joined the group of students. Let's go, let's get out of here. Instructor Roth thought he was dead, but he came back to his senses when he heard the voice and shouted happily. Under the protection of Spider-Man, the instructor and the students walked out of the mall smoothly and came to the pedestrian street outside. Shenan looked around and found that the situation of the city streets outside was even worse than that inside the mall just now. The school bus parked at the entrance of the mall had long been scrapped and was crushed into a pile of scrap metal by the collapsed building. One after another, the vehicles involved in the chain car accident blocked the main road. There were alien mechanical invasions in the streets and alleys, wanton killing and bombing, human cries and screams rose and fell, and the entire center of New York was completely in chaos. At this moment, it was like the end of the world. That is, in the chaotic scene, Shenan saw a familiar tall figure on the roof of a car. The young man was wearing a special blue tight uniform, with a slightly raised buttocks and a 5-star round shield on his left hand. Different from the common toys on the market, this round shield, whether it looks like a metal texture or the non-physical mechanical trajectory of throwing out and hitting an alien robot and then returning again, represents that it is a genuine product with a certain historical significance. Captain. Shenan's mind moved. There is more than one superhero in New York City now. Captain America Steve Rogers also saw Shenan. He jumped off the car and quickly said to Shenan and his students, "It's very dangerous here. You should leave here quickly." "Where is safe now?" Instructor Roth asked anxiously. Captain America wore a helmet and half of his face was exposed. He looked serious and pessimistic and said bluntly, "Now it is not safe in New York. You should leave the city center along the road first. The outer city should have arranged for the citizens to evacuate the city now. Is the situation so pessimistic? Shenan frowned. Listening to Captain America's words, the whole New York may even fall. But it is true. Shenan raised his eyes solemnly and looked at the blue light column that was rushing into the sky in the distance. The dark abyss was getting bigger and bigger. The sky above the city area near the Stark Industrial Headquarters building was almost dark. Deafening thunders resounded from time to time in the area over there. Lightning from a clear sky directly knocked down a large number of alien aircraft flying in the air. Obviously, there were other unknown extraordinary heroes blocking the alien invasion. The alien mechanical forces that invaded New York now, the superheroes stationed here can barely cope with it, but as long as the hole cannot be closed, the number of alien mechanical bodies will continue to increase exponentially. This is the second large-scale alien invasion in modern human history. Shenan handed the energy gun he picked up to the instructor for use. First, he had never learned shooting, and second, he had the artifact guarding silver bracelet in his hand, which was much more useful than the alien energy gun. With the New York superheroes and alien forces fighting together, plus the secret protection of Spider-Man, Shenan and a group of students in the class, as well as the instructor, evacuated the central city area that had become a battleground without any danger. Withdrew 10 kilometers away. There is no sign of alien invasion in this area for the time being. A large number of police officers are struggling to maintain traffic on the roadside. The main roads are full of vehicles and pedestrians. They carry large and small bags of luggage and continue to evacuate outside New York along the road out of the city. Instructor Roth, with an energy gun hanging on his chest, said to his assistant and a group of students, "Baker, you take the students here to continue evacuating outside the city." "Roth, you want to stay?" Mysterious Baker said in surprise. Instructor Roth said firmly, "Some students just separated from the main force and stayed in the city. As an instructor, I must stay here to find them and take them out." "Okay." Baker saw that he had made up his mind, sighed, and stopped persuading him. "Wait, where is classmate Shenan?" Baker glanced at the students around him and said in surprise, "I don't know, just now, he was still here." The students looked at each other. In the outer city, in an alley not far from the main road. Shenan entered here alone. As the shadow on the wall flashed, Spider-Woman was seen hanging on white spider silk, her body upside down and landing 2 meters below. "You still want to return to the city battle, right?" Shenan looked at Spider-Woman and asked. Spider-Woman nodded and said softly, "There are still many people there who have not had time to evacuate." "I knew it." Shenan was not surprised by this. Not only Gwen herself has the temperament of Officer George, she hates evil as much as she hates evil. Even when facing hatred, she chose to fight as Spider-Woman. Now, Spider-Woman will naturally not back down. "Then go ahead and do what you want to do." Shenan thought about it and encouraged. But, Spider-Woman, who was decisive and calm before, suddenly hesitated at this moment. "You are worried about me," Shenan said helplessly. If it was the usual Gwen, she would definitely deny it arrogantly, but now she is not Gwen, but Spider-Woman Gwen. "So," she said with certainty, "yes. Then I'll tell you a secret too." Shenan smiled, and suddenly reached forward, slightly opened the female Spider-Man's face mask, and pulled it up to the position of the other's high nose wing. What appeared in front of Shenan was an upside-down, small and delicate half-face of a girl. Half of the girl's face, half of the spider's head mask. "What secret?" the female Spider-Man asked curiously. Before she finished speaking, Shenan leaned forward and gently kissed the corner of the girl's lips. But this seemed to not meet the conditions for triggering the ability. After all, there was no medium. Shenan paused, and just as he hesitated, Spider-Woman's lips slightly opened, like a small dessert waiting to be tasted. There was nothing to hesitate about. Shenan adjusted the position of his mouth, covered the girl's 2 soft lips, and asked for the medium needed for the ability. Should we say that Gwen is worthy of being Spider-Woman? Not only is her body flexible outside, but her inside is also unbelievably flexible. Shenan once felt that he was tasting the most precious, fragrant and soft sandwich jelly. At the same time, his body began to have subtle changes. The pupils of his eyes shrank slightly. The hairs all over his body stood up sharply. The tough biceps and abdominal muscles that are difficult for bodybuilding to possess appeared one by one on his body. Huh, Spider-Woman Gwen opened her eyes wide and looked at Shenan in disbelief. She could feel Shenan's changes even more. After all, at this moment, her spider sense was strongly activated. Spider-Man's physique told her that the person in front of her was her own kind. There's nothing to worry about now. After parting lips, Shenan, who had obtained the super spider ability, said, Hey, have you been bitten by a spider too? Spider-Gwen, whose body was hanging upside down in the low air, was in doubt and looked at Shenan, who had super spider abilities in front of her. For a moment, she ignored the fact that Shenan suddenly kissed her. Shenan spread his hands. This is my hidden ability. Through the contact with you just now, I briefly possessed your ability. He paused and continued. Remember the person you met on the rooftop last week? That was me. You are that pervert, Spider-Man exclaimed and blurted out, and then as if reacting, she covered her mouth with force and said with a blushing face, So, as long as you kiss a girl, you can get her power. Ah, how to say it, it's almost like this. Shenan felt a little guilty, so he naturally couldn't tell the truth. In fact, as long as there is physical contact and the conditions for liquid exchange, it will be fine. Of course, through the direct channel of kissing, plus enough media. The ability that Shenan obtained is more perfect, stable, and lasting. This is verified on Paradise Island. Spider-Man suddenly frowned and said, Whose ability did you get last time? Ah, this. Shenan opened his eyes wide, feeling that he and Spider-Man were not paying attention to the same thing. At this moment, the ground suddenly trembled and shook, and the thunder and roar in the sky continued, indirectly helping Shenan out of the siege. What is that? Shenan and Spider-Man subconsciously raised their eyes and looked at the sky above the city outside the alley. They could see that the blue light column 10 kilometers away pierced the sky, and the area of the abyss torn open was 3 times larger than before. In the huge sky abyss, in addition to more black spots of alien mechanical bodies that descended, there were also alien flying objects as huge as spaceships and warships. The powerful momentum of the alien warships flying can be clearly heard 10 kilometers away, causing countless humans to tremble with fear from the bottom of their hearts. Shenan, I have to go. Spider-Man said firmly, looking at the alien forces descending in the distance. Shenan nodded. Be careful. If you can't win, remember to evacuate. Don't fight like last time. Okay, I will. Spider-Woman looked at Shenan deeply, then pulled up her spider hood, raised her hand and shot spider silk at the building opposite the alley. Her slender body flew and shuttled on the high-rise buildings, and soon disappeared in the direction of the battle in the city center. Watching the figure of Spider-Woman go away, Shenan exhaled helplessly and muttered to himself, You have chosen to stay, how can I leave like this, silly Gwen? In this respect, Gwen is very similar to her aunt. She always stands up when disaster strikes. She is a real hero with the glorious qualities of a god. Shenan is naturally not a hero, nor does she want to be a superhero. She is far from the great existence who gave up her life and everything for someone she doesn't know. But, Shenan is a person who will fight for his beloved. Since you want to protect the world, let me protect you. Shenan's eyes became brighter and brighter. He calmed down and began to look around the walls. First, he must master Gwen's super spider ability. Shenan tried to put his palm on the wall. The fingertips seemed to have invisible barbs, allowing him to climb up very easily. Even his feet stepped on the straight wall. Shenan was like a newborn spider. He tested his natural ability for the first time and climbed up the flat wall. His movements were very slow and cautious. Climbed to a wall 10 meters above. Shenan breathed evenly and looked down at the sky. His movements of crawling on the wall became more and more skilled and quick. Soon, Shenan climbed up the 10-story rooftop along the wall. He looked up and looked down, and could see the current tragic situation in New York City more clearly. With the high-rise Stark Industries headquarters building as the center, the area within a radius of 10 kilometers has become a large-scale alien war. There are a large number of alien mechanical bodies and giant reptile warships that have just landed in human cities and caused heavy damage to modern urban areas. High-rise buildings were razed to the ground in an instant, streets were burning with raging flames, and the smoke and dust floating in the sky condensed into dark clouds. Countless humans were screaming in despair. The miserable situation on Earth. In the outer area of the city center 10 kilometers away, there were vehicles and pedestrians carrying luggage on the road, leaving along the main road outside the city in all directions, with trance, fear, anxiety, misery and other expressions on their faces. It's like the end of the world. This hell is not a good start. Just as Shenan was looking at the situation of the battle in the distance, with a bang, several dazzling flames fell on the buildings not far away, and immediately collapsed several low-rise houses into ruins. Countless wood chips and gravel flew with flames, causing the people who had not yet evacuated to flee in panic. Shenan narrowed his eyes and quickly looked at the sky on one side. Less than half a kilometer away, several small alien aircraft were approaching at a high speed. Has the battle spread to 10 kilometers away? Just right, I'll use you to practice. Shenan took a deep breath and suddenly rushed to one end of the rooftop. He jumped over the more than 10-meter wide street and landed on the top floor of the high-rise building opposite. Although not as strong as the demigod when he had the ability of his aunt, his body seemed very light and agile under the spider ability. Shenan leapt and moved on the rooftop to a tall building, and happened to capture the movement trajectory of a small alien flying object. That's it now. Shenan looked at the flying object within 20 meters, his mind moved, and he quickly imitated the female Spider-Man and flipped his wrist. Well, the idea is very rich and the reality is very skinny. There was no spider silk shooting out of the wrist at all. Come out. Shenan was anxious and tried to flip his other wrist, but still no response. Looking at the alien flying body that was about to pass by, Shenan gritted his teeth and jumped forward directly. Saw a figure flash by. The alien robot driving the small aircraft was startled. He controlled the aircraft and tried to dodge, but Shenan jumped forward and grabbed a corner of the pedal of the aircraft with his left hand. Get off here. Shenan grabbed the metal ankle of the alien robot with his right hand, pulled hard and threw the alien robot out of the aircraft. It smashed into the building next to it with a force of several tons. Whoa. There is also a robot in the back seat of the alien craft. Seeing Shenan, the alien robot's eyes glowed red, the muzzle of the gun was downwards, and the trigger of the energy gun in his hand was continuously pulled. At this moment, Shenan was so excited that his extraordinary senses throughout his body were sharper than ever before. The keen perception seems to radiate outwards, weaving an invisible and dense spider web around it, and it can clearly perceive everything around it. In this state, he naturally understood the direction in which the gun was aimed, so when the alien robot pulled the trigger, his body also made dodge movements at the same time. Laugh, laugh, laugh. While holding on to the fast-moving aircraft at high altitude, Shenan twisted his body with amazing flexibility, narrowly avoiding the laser beams that shot at him. Shenan grabbed the other side of the aircraft's pedals, swung his body slightly, kicked his heels up high, and climbed directly over the aircraft, kicking away the alien robot that still wanted to shoot. Losing control, the aircraft accelerated out of control and crashed into a building. Shenan was forced to jump out of the plane. He was in the air and he subconsciously turned his wrist. This time, the white spider silk successfully shot out from the wrist. There was no time to rejoice. The other end of the spider's thread was stuck to the outer wall of the tall building. Shenan pulled the thread in time, and his whole body suddenly flew high. Take off. Behind him, the alien aircraft hit a high-rise building and immediately roared and exploded into a broken fireball. In New York, the alien invasion is still expanding. Less than half an hour. Now, even in the urban area 10 kilometers away, alien robots appear from time to time. You can imagine how fierce the battle in the central battlefield is. Outskirts of the battlefield. Bang. Wearing a peaked cap that covered half of his face and a jacket, the boy swung down like a spider silk. The moment his body landed on the ground, he followed up with a punch and knocked an alien robot on the street to the ground. Crack. Tons of power were concentrated on this punch, and the chest of the alien robot was smashed and pierced, and the ground where it lay was cracked with several cracks. Looking at the electric sparks sizzling on the broken body of the robot, Shenan exhaled a breath of turbid hot air, and looked up at the sky on the other side of the central battlefield with bright eyes. The blue light column that caused the alien invasion is still continuing, glowing with a strong light that makes people despair. Even if the blue beam can be turned off now, the alien army that has descended into New York has already taken shape. New York, maybe it will really fall completely today. I have almost mastered the spider ability on my body, it's time to find Gwen. Shenan felt a sense of urgency in his heart. If New York City is really on the verge of falling, I am afraid that before New York completely gives up resistance, those congressmen and generals outside will have given up New York first. Shenan was about to leave, but suddenly saw the ruins of a collapsed residential building next to him. A string of addresses was vaguely hung on the only surviving half of the door iron fence. Originally, it was just an unintentional glance, but inexplicably, Shenan felt that this address was extremely familiar. Recently, where have you seen it? Shenan was shocked, and reached out to take out a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. The address written on the paper was exactly the same as the current one. A silver-haired figure flashed through his mind. Pete. Shenan quickly rushed to the front of the building ruins and shouted inside. No one responded. This is natural. The whole house collapsed, and the surrounding area was full of charred marks from the bombing. It is very likely that Pete and his family had already evacuated. If he really stayed inside, then now, there is basically no chance of survival. Shenan was silent. He put his hand on a stone in the rubble of the building, closed his eyes, and used his extraordinary spider sensitivity to sense it carefully. Under the ruins, in the cracks between the broken houses and the wreckage of furniture, there was no light. There were dead things all around. The only surviving girl lay motionless in the cracks between the ruins. She could not sense any light or sound from the outside, and could only hear her own weak breathing and heartbeat. Even the air was very thin. The girl really felt what it was like to wait for death alone. The only lucky thing in her heart was that her twin brother was not at home before the house was blown up. The girl's consciousness began to blur. Crack. Did I hear it wrong? Suddenly, the girl opened her eyes reluctantly as if awakened, and vaguely heard the sound of turning over objects outside. I'm here. The girl opened her mouth and wanted to shout, but she was so weak that her voice was so small that it was almost inaudible. But the turning sound became more and more obvious, as if the man knew that the girl was here. Until a very bright light from outside shone in, and the girl opened her eyes wide, and what came into view was a gentle boy's face. Shenan forcibly turned over the ruins bunker, and saw that the survivor buried deep in the crack inside was a red-haired girl. Should it be more appropriate to describe her as a loli? The girl, about 13 years old, was wearing a winter dress, and her whole body was covered with dirty dust. Shenan didn't care, and carefully picked up the girl, lowered his head and asked, "What's your name?" Wanda, the red-haired girl said weakly. You are Pete's sister. Shenan suddenly realized. Sister. Little Wanda was stunned for a moment, lying in Shenan's arms like a wounded rabbit, and finally nodded timidly and asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" Shenan Prince. I met Pete last night. I wonder if he mentioned me. Shenan said. Yes. Little Wanda looked at Shenan blankly. She didn't expect that the person her brother mentioned yesterday would save her life again today. Pete is not at home, right? Shenan asked to confirm. No. Little Wanda shook her head with difficulty, and suddenly realized something. She stared at Shenan and struggled to look around. My parents. I'm sorry. Shenan felt that he shouldn't hide it from the girl. He looked at her and said bluntly, when I was searching just now, they were found first and had lost their life signs. Wanda's body trembled violently. In fact, the girl was buried in the ruins just now and didn't hear any sound, so she vaguely had this idea. Until now, it was confirmed that Wanda's will finally couldn't hold on, and she fell into a coma with her eyes closed. Shenan looked down at the unconscious Wanda, and held her a little tighter with his hands. He could understand that a girl of this age who suddenly lost her parents would definitely not be able to bear the huge grief for a while. And today, not only Wanda's family lost their family members, but countless families in New York were destined to be broken. Shenan sighed and was about to take Wanda away with him in his arms and send her to a relatively safe place outside the city. But something unexpected happened. Ta-ta. 1, 2, 3, 6. 6 alien robots fell from the sky, surrounded and landed in the outer area of the ruins, surrounding Shenan who was holding the girl on the ruins. In addition, there were several small alien aircraft hovering in the low sky, staring at Shenan below. Are you coming for me? Shenan's eyes were slightly cold. These alien robots were obviously communicating with each other. Since he had just killed some alien robots on the periphery of the battle, more alien forces were obviously sent to concentrate on encircling him. There were alien enemies in the sky and on the ground. If he was alone, the ability of the super spider alone would be a bit difficult. What's more, he was holding an unconscious girl in his arms, so it was not easy to take action. I can only break out. Shenan was about to break out, but soon, he noticed something was wrong. The alien robots holding guns on the ground and the aircraft hovering in the low sky seemed to be in a dead state and were motionless at this time. No, it should be said that a mysterious and strange powerful force controlled their bodies. Unable to move at all. Crack. First, the head of the first alien robot twisted 360 degrees autonomously, and a sizzling electric current flowed from its neck. Then, the heads of the other alien robots also twisted one after another. Not only did the alien robots commit suicide and die, but in the air, the parts of the small alien aircraft began to tear and disintegrate one by one. Ding ding dang dang. The alien mechanical forces that could have posed a threat to the super spider Shenan, before they could make a move, went to self-destruction in a dead silence, and turned into a pile of scrap copper and iron and fell on the ruins. The spider ability was a strong warning. Shenan quickly hugged Wanda and turned around, and saw another green-haired girl with smoky makeup, stepping on the metal parts all over the ground and walking behind him. Hi, little brother. Lorna waved to Shenan with the same enthusiasm as when they first met, and her white and slender hands were surrounded by green fluorescence. On the ruins of the outer city battle, Shenan was a little dazed, looking at the green-haired girl who appeared with a pile of alien mechanical parts under her feet. Isn't it the gangster boss Luna who met last night? At this time, Luna's hands were lingering with mysterious and unknown green fluorescence, and her small body exuded a powerful oppressive force that was as solid as reality. Whether it was the alien mechanical troops that immediately disintegrated and collapsed just now, or the super spider's mutant physique's involuntary high-level warning, it undoubtedly showed Shenan that the girl in front of him had a terrifying ability that was inconsistent with her young age and the appearance of a loli. So, Shenan blinked and said very tactfully, "Hello, boss." Tisk. Luna was slightly surprised, waved her hand to disperse the green fluorescent energy, and laughed wildly. Why, now you want to join my forces? No, Shenan thought about it and gave an ambiguous statement. But, in my mind, you are the boss, the most dazzling star in the night sky, North Star. By the way, how about I call you North Star Boss from now on? North Star, I like this name, Luna muttered, but soon, she seemed to react again, looking at Shenan expressionlessly and said, "Are you fooling me? The boss in my mind. In other words, you still don't plan to be my subordinate?" Without waiting for Shenan to speak, Lorna waved again and said, "Forget it, whatever you want." "Thank you, Boss Polaris." Shenan breathed a sigh of relief, and then asked curiously, "Boss, how did you end up here?" Lorna did not respond. She glanced at the bodies of the middle-aged couple who had lost their vital signs on the ruins of the house. There was no expression on her smoky makeup face. Lorna said inexplicably, "Pete was taken away." "Who?" Shenan frowned and asked. "I don't know. My men saw it. Not long ago, someone took advantage of the chaos of the city's war and took Pete to a modified black bridge car. He should not be in New York City now." Lorna looked at Shenan calmly and said, "My men and I are also preparing to evacuate out of the city." Shenan nodded and said, "Then you should leave quickly. Now, this city may be destroyed at any time." He did not suggest that the powerful Lorna save the city or something. Facing the current alien invasion, everyone has their own choice. Even if that person is powerful enough, it is understandable to choose to evacuate, as long as he does not take advantage of the crisis to cause chaos. "Do you want to leave with us? With me here, I can ensure that you can leave New York safely," Lorna said confidently, and she also had the capital to be confident. "No, my friend is still in the battle in the center of the city. I have to go in to find her." Shenan refused very straightforwardly, and gestured to Wanda in his arms. "If possible, please take her to a safe place." Lorna's eyes fell on Wanda, and a ripple of emotion flashed in her eyes, and she stepped forward to approach Shenan. "You are too tall, squat down a little." The green-haired loli frowned slightly and said dissatisfiedly, "Yes, boss." Shenan didn't know what to say. This was the first time someone said he was too tall. Of course, no one dared to say that the current Polaris boss was too short, otherwise he must be tired of living. Shenan held Wanda, with his feet one in front of the other, and his body slightly tilted forward, so that his eyes were at the same level as Lorna's. Their eyes were looking at each other at a close distance. A look of surprise flashed in Shenan's eyes. He didn't see clearly in the alley last night, but Lorna's eyes were light green, cold, charming, like a crystal clear emerald. This is like the finishing touch. With Lorna's delicate and arrogant little face, the uninhibited and unrestrained smoky makeup at the corners of her eyes, she has an alternative and extreme beauty. Lorna looked at Wanda, who was unconscious in Shenan's arms, and fell into silence for a short time. Shenan suddenly became curious. Lorna appeared on the periphery of the battle here, most likely not for him, but for the current red-haired girl Wanda. After all, she was still paying attention to Pete, who was captured by the mysterious force. Wait, Shenan noticed something. The green-haired girl Luna in front of him and the red-haired girl Wanda in his arms, although one was wearing heavy makeup and the other was without any makeup, they could still see a little resemblance from each other's beautiful faces. Could it be? A bold guess flashed through Shenan's mind, but the next moment, his brain went blank and crashed. It was Luna who suddenly stood on tiptoe, her body close to Wanda in Shenan's arms, and forcefully sealed Shenan's mouth. Shenan was stunned for a moment. Was he kissed again? The girl's kiss seemed a little unfamiliar and unskilled, but very domineering and bold. Shenan only felt that his lips were bitten, and a little blood tasted on the tip of his tongue, but the girl still showed no sign of stopping. Why is this happening? Shenan wanted to retreat, but Luna put her hands on his shoulders instead, half controlling his body. Because his hands were still holding the unconscious Wanda, Shenan couldn't get away for a while. There was no time to think. In order to prevent her lips from getting hurt again, Shenan could only guide the girl to the right path. Luna opened her pale green eyes wide, and learned very quickly, even applying what she had learned to other situations. Until Lorna stepped back violently, leaving a trace of visible medium. She wiped her mouth, and the dark lipstick on her lips disappeared. She said nonchalantly, "It feels not bad." Why? Shenan looked at a loss. "Nothing. Just treat it as a reward for you, my little brother. Next, use my ability well." Lorna reached out to take the unconscious Wanda, turned around and walked away from the ruins. Shenan watched the other party go away. Why did the other party know his ability? Or when was it exposed? The most likely time was when he separated from Spider-Man just now. Pa! Shenan suddenly knelt down on the ground with his left hand supporting the ground, and the 5 fingers of his right hand tightly covered the left chest where his heart was. So hot. The heart was burning like never before, as if there was a furnace burning all the time, so that the blood in the body was boiling. Shenan panted rapidly and broke out in cold sweat. His pupils sometimes expanded and sometimes contracted, and his eyes switched back and forth between black and green, wavering. This is the first time that Shenan has 2 extraordinary powers at the same time through the Lord of the Dependent. The parasitic characteristics of the symbiont are different from the last time. After all, the symbiont is just a parasitic combination and can be separated, but this time. The super spider ability of mutation evolution, the special extraordinary ability of mutation evolution. The 2 extraordinary abilities that are far different in terms of compatibility and fit are gathered in Shenan's body at this moment and begin to be forced to merge. 2 super genes, one appears in the body, destined to devour the other, and cannot coexist with each other. However, due to Shenan's ordinary physique like the universal charge, the DNA chains of the 2 genes began to break. Under the influence of the Lord of the Dependent's ability, the extraordinary genes briefly overlapped and repaired into one. Shenan raised his eyes. His hair did not change at all, but the blurred color under his eyes was fixed to ice blue. New York, the outer areas of the city that the war has not yet reached. In a factory warehouse, 5 or 6 cars, including luxury cars and RVs, were parked side by side. Inside and outside the cars, many gangster characters with dyed hair or tattoos were waiting. These gangsters were anxiously wandering around, but they did not dare to drive away in advance, so they could only wait in agony. At this time, Lorna carried the unconscious Wanda on her back and walked in from the warehouse door. "The boss is back. Sister-in-law has finally arrived. The aliens are almost here." They can finally leave this hellish place. The gangsters, both male and female, shouted with joy. One of the tattooed young men stepped forward and reported to Lorna with awe. "Boss, the cars are all ready, filled with gas, guns and cash. The license plates are all official police use, no one dares stop us from leaving the city." Lorna nodded calmly. She put the unconscious Wanda into a bed in the RV, then walked out of the RV compartment and leaned against the door of the RV with her arms folded. Outside the car, a group of gangsters who were preparing to set off all looked at her, confused. Lorna took out a pack of cigarettes and a metal lighter, held the cigarette in her mouth and lit it, blowing out a circle of white smoke and saying, "We are not leaving." "Boss, what did you say?" Everyone on the field was stunned. "Wait a moment, there is no need to leave in a hurry." Lorna raised her light green eyes, swallowed the mist, and looked up to one side of the city. In New York, the central war zone of the city, there is a retro building that is not much different from an ordinary church. On the rooftop of the top floor, the bald woman wearing a spotless white robe had a calm expression on her face. She had one hand behind her waist, and a strange golden circular mark appeared on the other hand. He looked at the alien machines that were flying past and striking like dense locusts, trying to invade. The bald woman stood on the rooftop of the building and waved her right hand with the golden seal at will. Before those alien machines approached the edge of the building, they were directly blasted to pieces by a powerful and invisible force, turning into countless iron filings with sparks flying away. He could easily defend the church building alone. Even when she looked at New York City outside, which was about to fall, the bald woman did not frown. For her, there were more terrifying potential enemies to guard against than the current alien invasion. Just at this moment, the bald woman seemed to sense something. Her face finally showed a subtle wavering in expression, and she raised her eyes to look in a certain direction outside the city's battlefield. "Alien." The bald woman frowned, then murmured to herself, "Variables." On top of the ruins, Shenan, who possesses two extraordinary genetic abilities at the same time, stood up. His ice blue eyes lowered his eyes and glanced at his hands. He could feel an unprecedented sense of wonder filling his heart. It's not clear what this strange feeling is. But Shenan looks to the inside of the battle situation in the center of the city. If he is in his current state, he might be able to reverse the fall of New York. Thinking of this, Shenan walked towards the central battle situation. Entering the urban battle situation within 10 kilometers, that is, the junction zone between the inner and outer areas. The urban area here has completely lost power, and humans have long since evacuated, leaving only buildings, vehicles, and personal belongings such as shoes. No part of the entire street was intact, and thick smoke was rising everywhere. Click, click, click. In addition to alien robots that control small aircraft, there are also alien mechanical creatures that crawl on all fours, wandering around the urban areas that have been basically declared occupied, searching and hunting the surviving humans who are hiding. Suddenly, some alien mechanical creatures were searching inside the ruined building. They all raised their metal heads sharply and looked at the road outside with their eyes flashing with red electronic pupils. A deserted and messy city pedestrian street. A human boy with black hair and blue eyes was walking forward. He lowered his head and thought about something while delving deeper into the battle situation inside the city, as if he was unaware of the terrifying alien existence lurking. Bang! From the high-rise building on the side, a crawling alien mechanical creature violently smashed through the glass and rushed towards the young man on the street below. The sharp metal front claws are about to pierce the stomach, and the wide metal fangs are about to bite the head. The human boy ignored it and walked forward minding his own business. When the alien mechanical creature jumped within 3 meters of the boy, it suddenly stopped all its movements and was fixed in midair as if stuck. Its metal body could not move any closer. It's like being held tightly by an invisible big hand. The alien mechanical creature remained motionless in the air until the young man moved his finger forward. The alien mechanical creature, which had stopped for 5 seconds, suddenly flew through the air at an extremely fast speed and crashed into the alien creature that was attacking from the other end. On the star mechanical creature. The metal heads penetrated each other's metal chests, and the two alien mechanical creatures were scrapped into a pile of scrap metal and fell to the ground without intelligence. "I see," Shenan muttered to himself. At this moment, he finally understood that Lorna's powerful root ability, metal control, and Shenan looked up and looked at 3 or 4 other alien mechanical creatures that were surrounding him from different directions at the same time. No action, just a thought. A huge green energy tide swept outward with Shenan as the center. The energy tide washed over the oncoming alien mechanical creatures, causing their bodies to burst with lightning, disintegrate and shatter, and fall back and smash into abandoned cars and buildings. This is magnetic field manipulation, metal control, magnetic field manipulation, and stance. These are the extraordinary abilities possessed by Lorna. However, the ability that Shenan now possesses is a fusion of the abilities possessed by Lorna and Gwen. It is not as simple as possessing 2 extraordinary abilities at the same time. The 2 extraordinary abilities ushered in the fusion and superposition of each other, enhancing and optimizing each other's ability. Shenan tried to stretch out an index finger forward, and suddenly, a metal spider silk shot out from the fingertips. Swish! The metal spider silk, which was almost invisible, shot forward, instantly passed through 100 meters, and directly pierced a small aircraft, including the 2 alien robots on the aircraft. String of candied haws. Is this the spider ability after the metal control is enhanced? Shenan retracted the metal spider silk. While he was still thinking, several orange-yellow flames suddenly shot towards him from a distance. Shenan instinctively tilted his head and easily avoided a flame, but because his position did not move, he was still covered by the flame. Boom! Shenan and everything within a radius of 10 meters were enveloped by a powerful explosion. Before the flames and smoke caused by the explosion dissipated, a slender figure walked out of the pit that was more than 3 or 4 meters sunken. The silver spider pattern reflected the cold light of metal in the sun. Shenan wore a spider-hooded suit of almost the same style as Spider-Man, but the suit was made of highly tough spider silk metal, like a layer of silver exoskeleton covering the entire surface of the boy's body. This should be the final form of having both metal control and super spider abilities. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.